Anti-establishment historians tend to be an unpopular lot, and my own works will undoubtedly serve to reinforce this attitude by those who have published garbage adorned as history. It is my intent to make enemies, to topple their cherished pillars, to silence those charlatans who have sold their fictions off as facts. My mission is to educate those willing to know. I have no doubt I will lock horns with many along the way. The materials that I offer in my books are for those who are unafraid of the dark, who want the truth undiluted, direct. The ancient past, behind the scenes happenings throughout all time periods, censored histories, the academic cover-ups, real facts about race, religion, subversive societies, and even predictive systems of analysis by which future events can be known beforehand or uncovered and explained. Archaix is for the public domain to come to a place where they can receive information that has not been diluted. It has not been censored. You're not going to like some of the things you hear. Some of the many videos are going to tick you off. They're disturbing. The core things that we have been taught since we were introduced into this world have to be peeled back layer by layer by layer for us to fully comprehend the absolute medium of deception that we are totally immersed within. Our world is not what you think it is, but it is a beautiful place. It's all a matter of perception. But where we've been in the past in the collective, as a species, as a race, and where we have traveled in the past up until the present, in our personal lives, has everything to do with where we're going. One who is properly informed is not easily deceived. The fact that so much energy has been expended in covering up the truth about our past can only mean that, though we are blind to it, we must be such a threat to our controllers that burying the past was the only recourse they had in maintaining their power. Or, said another way, we are more than we suppose ourselves to be. Good afternoon, my peeps. How was my audio? Let's get the audio check out of the way. We got some construction going on, so change locations today. It's a little too loud. Good sound. Excellent. Excellent. Got Jordan Crowder in the studio right now. I've been chatting with him. We're gonna get this video set off. You guys know you got a whole new Göbekli Tepe video coming. You already know I've already done 4 videos in the past, 2 of them especially about the misinformation put out on Göbekli Tepe, and then 2 more videos on the alleged antiquity of the zodiac. So these 4 videos are very important, and I'm providing them in the description box for the new Göbekli Tepe video, because what you're going to see and hear in this new Göbekli Tepe video completely shatters the establishment narrative about what they're saying about this place. I'm going to show you identical architecture that had the same utility, not ceremonial, not religious, in ancient America, in Babylon, Greece, and even ancient Rome. That architecture is not unique. What's unique is what they're saying about Göbekli Tepe, but apparently it's not applicable to everywhere else. The exact same architecture has been found. So that's coming, along with a great video on the survivors of the flood. I have a massive video. It is long, and it's going to set you straight about the Sanskrit, about the Vedic, the Hindu, the Brahmin, the calendars, everything you need to know about calendrical systems in these ancient texts, and when these post-reset texts were actually composed. It's not what you think, guys. People love to talk about how old civilizations are until they see the data. So we're gonna get into all that. But we have probably 15 videos. 7 or 8 of them have already been uploaded to YouTube, and they're scheduled to drop every other day, sometimes back to back, depending upon what they are. Massive decodes, massive topics. The subject matter is getting deeper and deeper. I told you, 2024, it's too late to be polite. I have every intention of being an iconoclast. It is necessary, because what's being put out into the field is absolute BS. And more truther channels, more and more truther personalities who are in the field and have been providing some pretty good stuff, and some of it was edgy. Yeah, they're signing the contract, guys, and they're starting to do deals behind the scenes with corporations, and their narratives are getting hijacked. That's not going to happen with Archaix. But when I see it happening around me, I'm going to call it out. 2024 is not over, guys. But we're going to go ahead and get on with this interview. This is Jordan Crowder. He's got a lot of interesting things to say on Twitter. He's probably got some more stuff posted elsewhere, but that's where I'm in contact with him. I see his posts pop up on my feed all the time. We're going to introduce Jordan Crowder to the studio right now. How you doing, Jordan?
Hey, Jay, it's doing good, man. Thanks for having me. And what's up, Aaron's? How y'all doing out there?
I know a bunch of them know your name. That's how I learned about you, was people emailing me and dropping comments in my chats.
Yeah, man, I've been following you since you were rolling around in that noisy van years ago. I'm
still rolling around in that noisy van.
I know. I love seeing those nostalgic videos. But I mean, you just did it the right way, just raw. You just put on the camera on dash, you're doing your thing, you're working, and in the meantime, as you're traveling around, you're like, you know what, I'm just going to give these people a piece of my mind. Obviously it resonated. You built this big audience, and you're making big splashes, and that's the way to do it. You don't always have to have flashy production and all this kind of stuff, man. It's just unloading your brain. You had decades of ammo, waiting to just unload, and it's beautiful watching it just come out like a machine gun.
Yeah, man, I can't. What good is knowledge if only one man knows? That's not my quote. That's a famous quote. I can't even remember who said it. Oh, Franz Boas said it, matter of fact. But yeah, I'm glad to see the message is getting out there in 2 ways. One, great resistance. People are not trying to hear simulation theory. And I get blamed all the time, Jordan, for inventing it or bringing it to the table, when all I've done, the greatest minds that I'm always citing, they introduced simulation theory. All I did was show simulation theory from a historical and calendrical perspective. That's all. That's the only thing I brought to the table. So,
yeah.
I catch flack for it all the time.
I mean, they used to call it, being in a play, or, they'd call it, Maya, the dream, like all these different cultures have been basically describing the same thing for thousands of years, just using different metaphors, because it has to do with, your frame of reference. So now we call it simulation theory because we're in a technological age. But I mean, it's the same thing that mystics and philosophers have been talking about for a long time.
Oh, I agree with it, man. So what are you doing, man? What is your goal? I mean, tell my community what got you interested in these topics. What is it you're trying to accomplish? Is there a trajectory to what you do, or are you just basically trying to inform a wider demographic on a lot of these things? Because there's a lot of crossover between what you're posting on X and the things that I promote as well.
Yeah. So I'm gonna take your audience on a little journey here in just a minute with a little slideshow that'll go more in depth of where I came from, how I got to where I'm going, where I am now, and then where I'm headed. And we'll converse through it. And then afterwards, I'll shut down the presentation and we can just chat. But basically, and definitely don't judge me by my X. It's like I have a marketing company that I do for a living. And so I manage a lot of social media accounts and stuff for all my clients. So it's like they say, like the landscaper's yard needs to be mowed and the mechanic's car's broke. My social media is, I'm about to completely shift my life. I've already shifted my mindset, and I'm about to go 100% into these other topics. But for now, it's kind of been like a part-time job at most. So, I kind of throw my thoughts out there. X kind of brings out a different side of me, it seems to. It's funny how X works. Yeah. But I like it. I love the free flow and how you can just put your thoughts out there. and definitely those are my thoughts and those are my interests and everything. But I'm about to take everything in a little bit of a different direction. So my overall trajectory and what I'm really looking to accomplish is, and I'll get more in depth here in a minute, is this sounds cheesy, man, and this is not where I used to be, but it's where I'm at now. Raising the collective consciousness, and not in a hippy dippy woo woo way, but like more from like a an evolutionary standpoint. I've had some things happen that have forced me to do certain things in my life that all work towards this end goal of helping. I'm just one spoke in this big wheel of helping this evolutionary development of consciousness. So that's my overall purpose and goal with everything that I do.
All right. So I'll just be brutally honest with you. That is the goal of a whole lot of people, and I do believe that there is a finite number of souls within this experience that are going to resonate with that. They're going to be on board. They're going to offer their energy, their help, and all that. But I'm not saying that this is factual, but from my experience, it feels like the overall collective is never going to be on board. They are so immersed in dungeon programming, unless you have a formula that's going to shock them from their paradigms, I don't see how the majority are going to get on board. I feel that you have the power to build a fantastic world, a fantastic community within the confines of a construct that's already lost. But to change the overall construct is not something I've ever seen, ever done in the historical record.
Nah, and that's not the goal. This world is a simulator built for conscious development, and it's supposed to be insane. It's supposed to be challenging. It's a minefield. You're not here to change the world. You'll just expend all your energy and freak out and go nuts if you try to do that. The world will be crazier when you leave than when you got here. And that's by design. And the system will always inject new programs to make it challenging. That's what it does. You'll never solve it. You'll never fix it. It's not meant to be fixed. But within there, you are meant to, as like a school, you're meant to evolve the consciousness that comes here to learn. And that's the overall goal, not Earth. Earth is a training grounds. It's a challenging game of sorts. And the system, whether it's been hijacked or not, I do love that theory, the artificial intelligence X, because there is lots of evidence that there is something that has been injected into the system that didn't used to be there. Maybe it was made for a different purpose and now it's being used in a different way. That's entirely possible, and I'll actually get into that more later. But and that's actually probably probable. But the overall, like the larger consciousness has ultimate control, and it probably won't let things deviate too far. But and I'll explain this more. And it's funny you said, most of the population will think I'm bananas and not care, and that's totally fine. And I get it from every direction. I don't care. But I have developed something, and I am developing something that will help to shift that. It's something that might be able to make a splash into people that otherwise would just, immediately dismiss me and this entire premise. So I'll talk about that more in depth. But that is the goal, and the goal is not to change people's minds. So if you want, I'll just get into the presentation, so it'll answer a lot of these questions.
All right. Before you do that, which I had as you were talking, I was envisioning the old system invented by Gary Gygax. It splintered into a whole bunch of RPG game systems, but it was originally called Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if you just described reality as a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, because initially, when you start at level 0 or level 1, and you're only given the problems that someone at that level, or maybe level 2, they might throw in some level 2 situations, adventures, modules, stuff like that for a level 1 character. And once you've mastered level 1, you can ascend to level 2, then level 3. But when you get to a certain point, you're now level 7, level 8. You're equipped to deal with all kinds of things. But the modules get very technical now, and they start throwing some real dangers, all kinds of situations and creatures and traps and all that. So when you were saying all that, I was thinking about my old RPG years when I was a kid. I used to play that game, and it's almost like that's reality. Reality's like that. We're now in a version of the reality construct that an AI is throwing the book at us because we must be heading towards something.
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right. There's games within games. So there's just a general game. You come to Earth, it's all about the human body needs to survive. You find a family, you find shelter, you make some money, yada yada. You can live your whole life that way, live and die, totally fine. Like imagine playing Mario Brothers. You can just blow through Mario and just jump on the little flagpole at the end, slide down and beat the level. Or you can take your time. You can find the hidden things. You can find the hidden levels. You can find the clues. And there's games within games. You're still going to get to the same endpoint. But if you take your time, find all the hidden stuff, get all the coins, go to the extra levels, you'll have so much more experience. You'll have so much more knowledge. And that's the game on top of the game on top of the game. And there's these things called like time release clues. You can think about it that way. Where like some of the stuff that you've been finding, these archaeological sites and through ancient history, that's stuff that the average person will skim right through. It's like playing Mario. You're just hauling ass through. You're not worried about the hidden stuff. But the more developed consciousnesses, the people that have been here over and over, and they've learned how to level up and they've learned to take their time and look for these clues, realize a very important lesson that Earth is an escape room. It's an escape room for your consciousness, meaning you're not escaping physically. You're not going to get on a spaceship and blast off from Earth. There's nothing out there. Space doesn't work that way. It's mind space. Space is not physical, but you can ascend spiritually and consciously. And you do that through looking at Earth like an IQ test, like a escape room. And only certain levels of consciousness, certain levels of awareness will even think to look for this stuff, will even be curious enough to look for this stuff. And to be able to be entrepreneurial enough to be able to set aside enough time in your life to dedicate to this undertaking, which you can confirm is a monster. The average person doesn't have enough time to do what you do. But you create that time through this development of your consciousness. You get to a point in life where you're like, okay, I'm not going to go work this 9 to 5. I need to have time to explore. I need to have time to do all this stuff. The average person looks at you like you're crazy. Like, why are you doing all this stuff, Chase? Well, you know what I just told you is it's an escape room. You're putting together clues that are hidden to the average person, but they're there on purpose. They might be placed there by the system itself as part of this IQ test.
This is okay. What you're describing in the past, I have borrowed the somebody was telling you that's an escape room is a great analogy. But Easter eggs, the construct gives Easter eggs. They're out there in the field for those who are willing to search and find them. It is like an advanced video game because you can live your avatar can live your life completely blind to all these things: sex, food, and living expenses, and going to work is your entire life cycle. It's your entire life cycle and being entertained. And then there's other people like me who, don't get me wrong, I do enjoy my sex. But I'm telling you now, I'm hard to walk in public with. Anybody who's been around me, Jordan, knows I will stop and stare at architecture and wonder, why in the hell did they build that way unless there was water flowing here? Why? I'm in the middle of a desert and I'm trying to figure things out. I totally lose interest in whatever I'm presently doing to try to answer something that doesn't make sense to me in the present. I see these Easter eggs everywhere. And yeah, that's exactly what you're talking about.
Well, they're hidden in plain sight, but it's like a time release function because it's time release in the sense that they've always been there, but we haven't always been consciously aware enough to make sense of them. And some of it's technological because you got to think a lot of the stuff we're finding because it's shared through the internet and that kind of stuff. So once humanity gets to a certain technological development point where we can share information more freely, like we're doing now, then we get to a conscious development point, like people like you that are actually consciously curious and seeking these things out, probably intuitively, like it's coming from within you. It's this urge to find the answer. This is a developmental point in our evolution. And that's when I talk about raising the collective consciousness. It's not about like sitting around singing kumbaya. It's knowing that like there's actually a point to all this. Like there is a reason we came here. There's a reason we're doing this. And and once you understand what that reason is, then it gives you the sense of urgency, and it gives you a purpose. Like, okay, I need to help out any way I can towards this common goal. So not to change people's minds, it's mainly to turn off all the programming and bullshit that everyone has been consuming and go back to your natural state. Because when you're in your natural state, these are the thoughts you have. People don't have these thoughts, not because they're not smart enough or not consciously connected. It's because we're programmed. We're programmed in such a way, in a manner that it overrides these subconscious and intuitive instincts that the average person has. You got to peel all that back.
Well, there's no doubt. I'm on board. Absolutely. Continue on, my brother.
Now that I got your attention. So, do you want me to share my screen now? And I can kind of give you a little background of how I got to this mindset that I'm in.
All right. What you got?
All right. Let's make sure I can do this right. Jason taught me this just a few minutes ago. So, window, boom, boom, share. Okay. Tell me if you can see that screen and hear my voice.
Absolutely.
All right, Aaron, let's go. So
we can see you too. You might not be able to see us on your screen, but we can see you clearly.
Okay, cool. I'll just have faith that y'all are all still there. The virtual avatars that y'all are. So, there we go. Man cannot discover new oceans unless he has the courage to lose sight of the shore. I love this quote because you have to be fearless in this pursuit that we're about to go on. So I'm mainly here to introduce a variable into your thinking, not to tell you what to think, not to say I'm right or wrong. I speculate a lot. There's a lot of things I'm wrong about, but I'll never stop thinking. And as long as at the end of the day, it's at least opened your perception a little bit, then I did my job. And then my goal ultimately is just to give you the tools to go and find out all these answers on your own. So we're just going to go back real quick to 2019. I had a very, very bad period. I was a severe alcoholic for a very long time, most of my life, from a very early age, and was on a runaway train, knew I was going off a cliff, and was just helpless. Like, my body had sanitized through alcohol and drugs the consciousness out of it. So I was just a autonomous robot, and I was just basically watching all this happen from a third person point of view. It hit a breaking point. I hit rock bottom. I couldn't get out of bed for days. I was dying in my bed. My wonderful wife was working her ass off, and basically she knew something was up, but I was convincing her I had the flu. It was just the flu, go to work, everything's fine. And day after day, I was doing this until I got to a point where she's like, "Oh my God, you're dying. I have to take you to the hospital." And so she rushed me to the hospital. I'm watching this whole thing from like a security camera, third person point of view. Like, I'm up in the corner, man. It's wild. And I'm sitting here watching my body die. And like, when I'm in the car on the way to the hospital, I described it in my book. Like, my consciousness was like flapping behind me, like a cape in the wind. I really felt like that. It was such a surreal feeling. So anyways, I get to the hospital, I'm in bad shape. They're telling me, "You're toast, kid." This like male nurse, he's like a tough love dude. He comes in, he like sits down next to me, and he's just like, looks at me, and he's like, "You did this to yourself and you're going to die." I'm like, "Thanks, dude. Where's the woman nurse?" So anyways, I'm a rough shape, like just completely toast. My blood pressure was 200 over 100. They gave me the most sedatives they've ever given a person in the hospital, to the point where the nurse was like confused why like my heart rate wasn't coming down. Like, I was about to have a heart attack and die right there. It was very, very bad. So then they finally get me calmed down a little bit. And you'll see in the top right-hand corner of this picture, there's a little blue thing. And I only show this because it was around this moment. We took this picture. I'm on mass amounts of drugs in this picture. It's a terrible picture. But my wife's there by my side. She's my angel. And this blue orby thing, I don't even know what it is. It doesn't cast any shadows or anything. It's there. And from this point on, I just really felt different. Like, I was like, no matter what it is, maybe it's a lens flare. I don't know what it could be, but everything changed, like, to the point where I was like, as sick as I was, I couldn't walk. I couldn't do anything. I was like, I got to get out of here. I got to get home and I got to heal, like, it's healing time. It's time to move on. It was like a whole page turn while I'm in the hospital dying. And I'm like convincing the nurses and doctor. I had to summon the like head doctor from the level. And, I'm telling her that, like, I got to get out of here, doc. And she's like, "You can't walk. What are you talking about? Look at all the machines were blinking and red lights and everything." And I'm like, "I got to go home and heal. I got work to do." And it was a really weird feeling, but I just knew like this was day one of the rest of my life. So they made me sign a bunch of forms, and the next day they let me go. And then the craziest thing happened. So, I'm at home, I'm healing, I'm full of gratitude. I'm like watching bugs on the ground. I'm like, oh, this shit's amazing. Look at this. But like, I looked in the mirror, and for the first time in my life, I'm 40 years old at this point. Like, I looked in the mirror, and the only way I can describe it is the thing looking back at me, I knew wasn't me. Like, I just stared at my eye in the mirror for freaking hours, and I was just like, what am I? Like, what is this? And it really threw me for a loop because I never had that thought before. And I really started questioning reality, who I am, what everything is. And that sent me on like a crazy dark night of the soul, because I started looking into, okay, like, where did we come from? What is it? Went into religious study, started studying Gnosticism, started studying like everything I could get my hands on about creation and who we are, where we came from, and what's the point. And most of it was kind of sending me down dark rabbit holes, like a lot of archonic kind of, satanic, not good stuff that I was just like, I became very hopeless, and I became consumed with it. And I went through this like another rock bottom, dark night of the soul, but during like a spiritual awakening. So it was way more existential, And so that period went on for a while, and it got real dark, and I didn't really know where it was headed. And then the craziest thing happened, like I started, like, synchronicity started happening. Like all this light started coming into my life, like abruptly. And I realized that there's like this initiation process that life goes through. Like all life is vibratory. It's ups and downs and negative and positive. And you have to have this almost like initiation into conscious awareness. And it happens, there's a myriad of different ways it can happen, but one of them is through like a near-death experience. There's all sorts of other things that can cause like a spiritual awakening, but the initiation process, just like shamans, like a lot of shamans, they have to go through this like cave initiation or isolation, or they put them in darkness where, you have to spend days in darkness, and you have to get to this breaking point of hopelessness and almost like, oh, did they forget about me in this cave? And then you emerge from the cave, and that emergent, that light hitting your face for the first time, like transforms you. And it basically sparks what Ishak Bentov talks about a lot, the Kundalini experience. The Kundalini experience is basically, the way he describes it is, you have this energy at the base of your spine that's primordial. It's been there forever. And it needs to flow, and it needs to like spiral up through your body, like how a serpent, like unwinding basically. And it actually blasts through your head, and the light comes out, and that's a Kundalini explosion, Kundalini experience. If done wrong, it can create psychosis. If done right, it can create a spiritual awakening. So it is a sensitive process. You can do it on purpose, or you can do it accidentally, like what seemed like was happening to me through all this. So I was just searching for answers. I was like, what the hell is happening to me? And Ishak Bentov is just a brilliant man. And he shined a lot of light on what was happening and what the point of it is, and this kind of stuff. So anyways, and stop me at any time, Jace, as I'm going through this.
No, go ahead. You're doing good.
Cool. And so anyways, and all this is new to me. I didn't know shit about shit. I was a very materialist. I was like, okay, you live, you die, that's it, right? Like I was not religious. I was not spiritual. I was nothing. Grew up my whole life, never went to church, minus a couple, Christmas masses, and never gave any thought to it. Always thought it was ridiculous and furthest thing from my mind. I didn't care about any of it at all. I was very skeptical. I was not the kind of person who would be sitting here talking to you about Kundalini and meditating and stuff like that. But life changes. So after all that, I was left with these three big questions, and they were just haunting me. I mean, just going through my brain, just on a loop. Who are we? Where are we? Why are we? Like, what is this? And those three questions are what set me out on this journey. I had to answer them. And I spent the last 5 years doing this. But at the time, so I'm sitting here, I'm like, okay, spiritually awakened. I see that there's more to this physical world than, what I'm looking at. There's more to me. I'm excited, but at the same time, I'm like literally dying. Like my body is broken. Okay. My body is very battered, decades of abuse. And I'm on thin ice. Like I went to the doctor and to get just like my checkup, and the doctor told me to lay down. She's like, if you sneeze right now, you're dead. Like your blood pressure is out of control. And so I'm sitting here like, On one hand, I'm like, yay, spiritually awakened, let's go, explore. On the other hand, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make it till tomorrow. Like they had me scared, so scared, and they were scared. My doctor was like literally trembling whenever I was in there. So I'm like, okay, before I can have fun on this whole spiritual awakening, I got to fix my body. So I'm searching and searching. Like, okay, how does someone like me, ADHD, hyperactive, bouncing off the walls? She told me I needed to meditate. I was like, haha, funny joke, doc. Like, give me the drugs. So she gave me all these pharmaceutical drugs. Nothing worked. I was like, okay, nothing was working. She's like, you have to meditate. They had an agreement with transcendental meditation. I looked into it, didn't like it. It looked like a pyramid scheme. I tried to meditate, didn't work. And I was like, ugh. I was like, so why are they telling me to meditate? And this is one of the most interesting things. So in my search to figure out why meditation would lower your blood pressure, because it didn't make any sense to me, I found an old Ishtok Bentov thing. I'm just going to read you this excerpt, and then I'll actually make sense of it, because Ishtok is way smarter than all of us, and sometimes it's hard to follow him. But this is, according to Ishtok Bentov, why meditation reduces your blood pressure. And it's freaking fascinating, and they should teach this to every single person that goes into the doctor with high blood pressure. So he says, yoga, Zen, or transcendental meditation, if practiced long enough, and this is going to be a mouthful, but I'll summarize it when I'm done, will produce a change in the sound frequency with which the human heart resonates throughout the entire body. According to Bentov, this change in resonance results from elimination of what the medical profession calls the bifurcation echo, so that the sound of the heartbeat can move synchronistically up and down the circulatory system in harmonious resonance approximately 7 times a second. Okay. Bentov describes the role played by the bifurcation echo as follows. When the left ventricle of the heart ejects blood, the aorta, being elastic, balloons out just beyond the valve and causes a pressure pulse to travel down along the aorta. It's like this tube that runs from your heart down your body. When the pressure pulse reaches the bifurcation in the lower abdomen, that's where the aorta forks to go into each leg. Okay, so it's like one tube that goes from your heart down, then it forks to go into each leg. When it hits that, so when this pulse from your heart, this blood pulse hits that, part of it goes down in the legs and the other part goes back up to your heart. Okay, it's like rebounds. Well, when your blood pressure, I'll just summarize from here on out. When you meditate, it reduces the pressure with which your heart beats, and it reduces the frequency with which it beats, so that because what happens is, say you have that pulse that's going from your heart down, it hits the fork in your legs, and then part of it goes back up. Well, then your heart beats again. It sends another pulse down. Well, that pulse hits the next pulse. It creates an interference pattern, basically waves within your blood. So imagine your blood going through your veins as like these rivers. And instead of it being this flowing, smooth river, it's all tumultuous. It's all full of waves, because one wave's coming back, hitting the next one, and they're just fighting each other. That increases your blood pressure, increases the noise inside your body, and increases the intensity in this like pond that's supposed to be still. So long story short, when you meditate, it quiets that. It calms down the waves. So he goes on to say, by placing the body in a sleep-like state, the gateway tapes achieve the same goal as meditation, in that it places the body in such a profoundly relaxed state that the bifurcation echo slowly fades away as the heart lessens the force and frequency with which it pushes blood in the aorta. The result is a regular rhythmic sine wave pattern of sound which echoes throughout the body and rises up into the head in sustained resonance. The amplitude of the sine wave pattern, when measured with a sensitive seismograph type instrument, is about 3 times the average of the sound volume produced by the heart when it's operating normally. Long story short, it makes your body harmonious, and it makes it still and calm. So he mentions, the gateway tapes. So I found this, and I was like, okay, finally, somebody's explaining to me how meditation reduces your blood pressure and your heart rate. This is what I needed to save my life, because nothing else was working. I dieted, I exercised, I bought all these fancy tools. I bought a sauna, I sat in a sauna every day, red light therapy, did every single thing you can think of. Nothing was working except this. So I was like, okay, what are the gateway tapes? This is where everything changes dramatically.
So which I'm familiar with. It's been 10 years since I read them, but I have copious notes from A Brief Tour of Higher Consciousness by Ishak Bentov, and then I read Stalking the Wild Pendulum. But doesn't he have a third book? I'm not sure. I've only read 2 books by Bentov.
He does. So Stalking the Wild Pendulum's my favorite one of his. A Brief Tour of Higher Consciousness is kind of like a summary of sorts of stalking, and then with some more, it's like an appendix. It's amazing. It's great for the beginner because it's simplified. He has a lot of like goofy little drawings and stuff in it. I love them. But he does have a third book, but I don't remember what it is. I haven't read that one. But
All
so
right.
you're familiar with his work, right?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with. I in my early years on Archaix in 2019 and 2020, I cited him profusely
Oh, nice.
with Alspensky and
Yeah.
with Paul LaViolette, because Paul LaViolette is saying a lot of the same things in subquantum kinetics, but he's saying it from a physicist perspective rather than psychological or from like a humanist perspective.
Yeah. So you're a fan of Ishtalk?
Yes, yeah, I'm a fan of Benzol.
Yeah. He's a cool guy. He's so funny too when he talks. He kind of looks like a character out of a movie, you know. But I really like him. He's a good guy, and he was a mystic. He was a self-trained scientist. I mean, he was light years ahead of his time as far as consciousness goes.
Yeah, it's my publisher that provides his books, Book Tree in San Diego.
Nice.
Yeah, anybody can get Stalking the Wild Pendulum and A Brief Tour of Higher Consciousness from the Book Tree.
Man, I recommend everybody read those books. You can start with A Brief Tour because it's short. I forget how long it is, but it's not very long, like 100 pages or something. It's very, very short, and it's an easy read and it's a fun read, and it will open your mind. I mean, he was talking about this stuff decades ago, and still the collective is just now getting to the point where we can wrap our minds around it. But he talks about it in a very easy to understand way. He has a gift when it comes to that stuff because he's a brilliant genius, but he could talk about things like so that anybody could understand it.
Yeah, I cited him a couple times in my my own book, Awaken the Immortal Within. He's great. He's great.
Yeah. So I found this, 30, 40-year-old little excerpt that explained to me what like doctors couldn't explain. No one could explain to me why meditation's important. They just say, hey, it works. We know it works. We've done studies. And I'm like, yeah, but how? Like my brain has to know how something works. You can't just tell me that it works. So then I started looking into Hemi-Sync because I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what any of this stuff was. And I was like, okay, evidently it's this sound technology that can almost instantly get your brain into this meditative state. They actually did this study where they put a 30-year trained Tibetan monk into an MRI machine next to somebody just doing Hemi-Sync. And the brain waves and their meditative state were almost identical. And the monk said, you just got to a place that took me 30 years of focused, hardcore, intense meditation daily, and you did it in minutes just using sound. So essentially what this technology does is, so say, for example, your brain has to be at like, say, 6 hertz to be in a theta, which is an REM sleep state. Well, 6 hertz is inaudible. You can't play a 6 hertz tone. But there is this brainwave entrainment, which works like this. So say you're trying to get us to a 6, you could put 400 hertz in one ear, 406 hertz in the other ear, and then your brain will just split the difference and it starts resonating at a 6 hertz frequency. And when you do that, it puts your brain into a theta brainwave state almost immediately. And why that's cool is because depending on the hertz that you put in, you can put it in delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma, whatever you want by just listening to tones. And it's non-invasive. If you don't like it, take the headphones off. There's no permanent, like problems. It's this very easy, simple way to get your brain into these states, which normally you'd be asleep. So the cool thing is we call it mind awake, body asleep. So your body is like asleep, basically. It's out, but your mind is fully awake. So you can go into these dreamlike states conscious. It's like lucid dreaming, but you're not even asleep. And you can explore these dreamlike states. Now, obviously, you'll probably see where I'm going with this. It goes way farther than just meditation, but I was just doing this for meditative purposes. I was like, okay, I bought one of those monitors. I'm watching my blood pressure come down as I'm doing this. I'm like, whoa, this stuff works. This is crazy. Like the doctor couldn't do this. No one could do this, but these headphones and the sound is making my blood pressure come down. It's making, me more calm and relaxed. It's like tuning my body like a musical instrument. Well, then some crazy stuff starts happening because I don't realize at the time that this technology wasn't made for people like me to meditate. It was made to alter your states of consciousness. And I found that out kind of the hard way because I would be meditating. And next thing you know, I'm literally in a different dimension, a different place. I'm having face-to-face with non-human intelligences, whatever you want to call them, like interdimensional. Like I'm interfacing with things that aren't here in this physical world. And I'm like, okay, like what's going on? Like there's that brief moment where you're like, did I just go crazy? So then I start, researching what all of this is. And real quick aside, another awesome benefit of meditating is what we call the lamp versus laser. So this will be interesting for people like you that want to focus on something. So your brain is basically like always expending energy in all these different directions, right? Because we're thinking about 80,000 thoughts a day. So you're just like a lamp. You just have energy going out in every direction, but it's short range energy. Well, whenever you meditate, especially using something like Hemi-Sync, what it does is it allows you to pick one thought and focus all of that energy like a laser on one thing. And when you do that, it can reach to such further distances outside of this physical reality here, where you can do all sorts of things like manifestation, which, you know, at Monroe Institute, they call patterning, and all these things where you can literally go into like the back end of the program and change and edit and stuff, because you're penetrating further with your thoughts. Because at the end of the day, if all is mind, if consciousness is fundamental and reality springs from consciousness, your mind is what interfaces with consciousness, and you can affect reality by using your consciousness as a laser to basically program and edit the code, for lack of better words. So that's the lamp versus laser, and that's one of the other benefits of meditating, is it turns your mind into a laser with enough focused intention. So I'm learning all this as I'm just basically trying to heal my body. So I dive into, okay, like, where did this come from? Like, why is no one talking about this? Why is this not a big deal? This is 2020 at the time. And I find Robert Monroe, who created all this. Are you familiar with him at all?
I am.
You are? Okay.
You know, I'm a little closer than I ever imagined. I didn't even know until recently that my father had worked with Robert Monroe, and I just found this out when he was on my channel. He's in the chat now,
Nice.
Danny, but he and some other people, after they came back from Vietnam and went into he did 2 tours in Nam, got hurt real bad in the second tour, and was thinking about a third tour when he got out of the Veterans Hospital, but they wouldn't let him go back, and they discharged him. And he told me that he and some other guys had done it. I was like, you know what, Pops? Oh, that's really good, man, but I really don't think I want to hear it anymore. I don't know too much about the Monroe Institute, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it has anything to do with like SRI, like Stanford Research Institute, but
yeah,
nothing good comes out of SRI. So I don't know what the connections are between that and Monroe Institute.
Well, I'll tell you, because there is a lot of, I won't say misconception, because all these things are truths, but I'll just tell you my experience and what I know. So Robert Monroe is an amazing dude. And he was just a radio broadcast engineer, very successful back in the 40s and 50s. And he was trying to come up with a new, radio was going away and he wanted a new technology. So he was playing around he was a sound scientist. He was playing around with radio waves because he wanted to create tapes where people could learn how to do stuff in their sleep. Remember those tapes, like you could quit smoking in your sleep and learn Spanish in your sleep, stuff like that. So he basically created this whole R&D department and made himself a guinea pig. And he's just experimenting with sounds and tones and different frequencies, trying to find the best way to put someone to sleep, because he wanted to create a tape that would put you to sleep and then teach you something in your sleep. This was a big deal back then. And through like 2 years of just constant experimenting with all these tones and frequencies and hertz and everything and making himself a guinea pig, he kind of there's a part of the physical body that keeps your consciousness focused into it. So your consciousness is kind of like a field of information, a field of energy that focuses into, like the human body is like a focusing instrument. And there's a part of it that keeps that consciousness focused in. Well, he broke that part, or at least dislodged a little bit, because he started having these spontaneous out-of-body experiences. And back then, in the 50s, no one knew what that was. So anyways, he spends a long time trying to figure out why he's leaving his body. And then when they run all the tests, they find out he's fine. He's not psychotic and he's not having a stroke or anything. He's like, okay, well, if this is going to keep happening, and then I'm going to learn how to control it. So he learned how to control these out-of-body experiences. And he became very proficient at it. He did a bunch of experiments to prove that he actually was in the physical world, just out of his body. And then the more he did this, years and years go by, he starts exploring out of this world and then other dimensions. And then he goes on just the wildest journeys. He puts together the Monroe Institute, which is just this consciousness exploration institute, brings in all these like-minded people, and they put together this explorer team of people that are very well trained, and they're basically like explorers of the astral, and they're going out and they're mapping and exploring all the different dimensions, and they're exploring every reality. I mean, to the emitter is what they call it, the emitter, where that actually projects this holographic universe. And he's able to map it out in great detail, wrote 3 books on it, created the Monroe Institute, and created the Gateway tapes, which was a training method of how to do this, right? He put it all in this coursework where you go there and you spend a week and you go through all the steps and you learn to become proficient in out-of-body exploration. So this is all happening around the time the Cold War is happening. And this is where SRI comes in. So the US government gets word that the Russians have like basically a secret spy network, and they are doing this kinds of stuff. And our government doesn't like to be like it was a Cold War, right? So we're competing tooth and nail with the Russians for everything. Right. So they're like, okay, well, we're behind the ball here. We gotta figure this stuff out. So they send all these people out to try to find. That's where Ishtok comes in. That's where Robert Monroe comes in. It's where all these people come in. It's how they got associated with the CIA and stuff. They were just at the leading edge of consciousness research. They had all the tools. They had all these programs. They had the whole institute. But they were doing it for good purposes. Actually, Robert Monroe was just trying to figure out like why. At first, it was just why am I leaving my body? And then he was like, oh, well, now I can teach other people to do it. You know, he thought that was cool. Well, then when the CIA comes in, of course, they co-opt this stuff. They create SRI, and they start using this to train people to become secret spies and remote viewing and all that kind of stuff. That's all based on.
I'm going to add another element to this that you're probably not aware of. The SRI. I didn't know. I'm vaguely aware of connections with Monroe Institute just from my own research, but I don't know all the stuff you do on that. But what I do know is that SRI was a CIA front, and it was because they were very worried about the Russian charm schools. The charm schools that were being operated in the forests of Siberia and Russia are so convincing that even American intelligence apparatus were not able to differentiate between who was a true American and who was a Russian. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, the charm schools in Russia were whole cities that were set up in the middle of forests, in the middle of nowhere in Russia. Real Americans were induced to come over in the 1940s and 50s and set these up. They had McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, shopping malls. Everything was made to look like an exact replica of American culture, and everybody had to speak English, and they even learned different dialects like Chicago, like East Coast, Central East Texan. They had different Russians were paired with Americans in these cities, and everybody had to talk and act absolutely American. And the Americans that were paid to be there to train these Russians to do this would censure the Russians, even if they got just a small nuance on an accent wrong. They would sit there and practice with them and correct them. And when the Soviet Union was sending like these little deep ops teams into different cities pretending to be Americans, American intelligence couldn't find them because they were too perfectly hidden. So SRI, they were going to try and find out what was going on using these other means. But anyway, that's just a little back history on the intelligence war during the Cold War. It happens to go back to the inability to detect these spies using conventional means. So SRI was one of the ways they were going to do it unconventionally.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I actually didn't know anything about the charm schools.
Well, there's a book in the 80s that even gives you the game, absolutely explains the entire thing to you. I want to say Robert Ludlum. It may not have been Ludlum, but he perfectly describes. As a matter of fact, the book is called Charm School, and he's talking about a very real phenomenon in that book, even though that book is fiction.
Yeah. I mean, it was a Cold War. You know, everything was very heightened, and it was a war. But it was almost like people don't realize it was a psychic war. Like they called them the Third Eye Spies. Like it was we were in a whole new frontier back then. Everyone was worried about nuclear war, but behind the scenes, we were training like these secret psychic soldiers and agents and stuff. And so were they. And I'm sure China's doing it now. And I'm sure it's way further than anyone can even imagine at this point. Because we're talking about 40 years ago. So Yeah, so SRI, if people don't know, it stands for Stanford Research Institute, and you know, it is a very fascinating place, but it sucks because anytime the CIA is involved in anything, you have to be skeptical and you have to immediately, you know, put up your bullshit meters and just kind of look at everything through a different lens. And it, you know, I hate that they get involved in these things, but that's just what they do. I mean, they want every advantage and they can get, and this was the big new thing back then. So, so Robert Monroe, I mean, he did work with Russell Targ on some things, but he was not part of like SRI. They basically used his knowledge and understanding and everything that he had developed to begin their, you know, their secret spy program. So he's always going to be lumped into that, you know, for sure. And no one will ever know for sure what level of involvement he had. But when you listen to him talk, he's incredibly genuine. And he's on the record many, many times talking about that, you know, he never took money from them. It was just a, you know, they came to him and said, hey, this is national security. We need, you know, help with this, this, and this. And, you know, whatever he did at that point, it's up to between them two. But so I can't vouch for any of that. But I know that he was doing all this decades before any of that ever happened. And that was just, you know, they went and they got a lot of people part of their programs. I mean, Ishtok Bentov, I mean, there's all sorts of conspiracy theories about how he died and that he was actually knocked off by the CIA. You know, he died in an airplane crash. Was one of the most tragic commercial airplane crashes in American history. A lot of mysterious things around that. So, you know, anytime the CIA is involved, you never know.
Monroe, though, I can see him being genuine. I can see. I'm not into the metaphysical. You just know I'm just not. But I can see him being genuine. I can see that maybe he had perfected a technique of his consciousness roaming free of his avatar. I have no problem with that. And I don't have a problem with it because an equally genuine guy has proposed a whole new reality to us in the 1970s that would make all that possible. It's where simulation theory came from. I know you're familiar with Philip K. Dick.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so if the world is as Philip K. Dick describes it, to such detail that he was able to write these amazing stories that ended up being some of the best Hollywood productions ever, then I'm on board that we're in some type of construct. And if we're in a construct, then what we perceive on a daily basis is fixed by rules that we all agree are true. But when somebody like Robert Monroe comes up and shows us, well, look, some of these rules are malleable. They can bend. I can agree with that too, because that's what makes a rule so powerful. Rules are actually empowered by the exceptions. So it's because an exception to a rule is going to be something so unique and so drastically different that it's what gives power to the rule as governing over the collective. There's always going to be a small minority that are never affected by the rules or nor governed by them. So yeah, I can see it. I just don't know much. You're talking to me about a subject matter for which I've never really delved into.
Yep.
Astral projection, transcontinental meditation. These things are not something that are really on my palate, but
yeah,
they are interesting to me.
Well, hey, that's like I said at the beginning, I'm here to introduce a variable into your thinking. So now this, like a little piece of glass that'll stick in your brain and maybe, you know,
a splinter in your mind.
Yep, exactly. So, and he's famous for telling people, he's like, I don't tell you anything except how to do these things on yourself, because if you don't do it yourself, it's not a known, it's just a belief. And belief systems are very bad for conscious development. So you want it to be a known, not a belief. So he's very fond of converting beliefs into knowns through personal experimentation, right? So that's what it's all about. Not just listen to someone tell you what's the deal, but go and do it yourself. So, you know, this is, you know, excerpts from the CIA Gateway document. They just talk about, like, just to explain real quick how the click out works. So you can see in the top left where it says the absolute and affinity. So this oscillating wave pattern is your brain wave. So the way you actually click out of this physical reality and go into other realities is super interesting. So when a wave goes up and then comes down, there's this infinitesimally small point at the top where it is at perfect rest. It's not going up, it's not going down, right? If you've ever been on like those swinging roller coaster things, the pendulum, right when it starts to come back the other way, you're like,
Yeah, it's in suspension. I get it.
Yep. Yeah. So that happens, but just for a brief second, constantly, all throughout your day, right? But when you go into like Hemi-Sync, when you use these tapes and you go into certain focus levels, what happens is it gets your brainwave oscillating at such a fine resolution to where those click out points that are usually so tiny and spread out form one straight line, right? It almost, instead of it being a wave, it pushes them together to where those click out points are continuous. And when you get in that continuous click out, that's when you actually, your mind is unfocused out of your physical body and is focused out of the physical. And that's when you can, at that point, consciously move it around to anywhere you want, like a camera. And that's what astral travel is. That's what astral projection is you have to get to that click out point. You have to get your brain waves to make this continuous, that little point at absolute rest where you're actually dipping into infinity, which they call the absolute. When it's there and it can stay there, it can maintain that oscillation. That's whenever you're no longer focused in your physical body. So that's how these tapes work. It's super fascinating. And it works, like, because I do this. So at this point in my life, I'm just like, a mystic told me one time, they said, when you're curious about the universe becomes curious about you. So what was happening at this point in my life is I was just hardcore going into all of this phenomenon, right? And the more I looked into it, the more things started happening. I mean, synchronicities, multiple UFO encounters, multiple paranormal events, shadow beings in my house, orbs outside, literally three different UFO sightings face to face, two of them on video. So it's just like pulling the curtain back, right? So I love this quote, when you're curious about the universe becomes curious about you, because it does. And the more you look, the more you will find. So we actually opened a studio called Alive and Kicking, where it was a metaphysical meditation studio, and just went hardcore engaging the phenomenon for a long time. That led me to writing my book, Entrepreneurial Spirits, where I basically just took all these spiritual skill sets and applied them to becoming a better entrepreneur. It's kind of like a business spiritual book. It's actually pretty cool. But then, okay, so I got to the point where I was like, all right, I had grown my beard out, grown my hair out, and I was turning into a freaking hippie. And I was, all into this stuff. And I was like, I need some scientific validation here, right? Need to put my feet back on the ground. So I was like, all right, I went to this period where I was like, I want to just hardcore dive into the science of all this. Like, is this real? Like, what is happening to me and what am I experiencing? And that took me to Tom Campbell, who's one of my favorite scientists, Ishak Bentov, Donald Hoffman, Walter Russell, John Wheeler, who, talks about the participatory universe, which basically we create our own realities. Michael Newton, who has written some fascinating books about the afterlife, the life in between lives. Ian Stevenson, who basically was a child psychologist who studies kids that talk about past lives, and it's very fascinating. And then Jason Bashir's, of course. And then at the top,
you flatter me, but I'm not a scientist.
No, but validation to me is anyone who focuses on facts and provable data. That's, a scientist to me isn't someone who went to MIT. It's someone who actually cares about facts and data.
I get it. I do.
Yeah. So these were all people that were like shaping my understanding of, okay, how does all this stuff that I've experienced in kind of my spiritual journey, like how does it relate to this physical world? And, Tom Campbell, he talks a lot about how this world is a virtual reality. So does Donald Hoffman, who's a neuroscientist. He talks about, how this is a.
I'm very familiar with Donald.
Oh, Donald Hoffman.
Yeah, the only one on the list that I mean, I got familiar with Walter Russell a long time ago. I even did a really extensive video where the principal authors were using all Walter Russell's material. But Ian Stevenson is the only one I'm not familiar with.
Yeah. So, do you know about Michael Newton and his?
I believe I have a book. He may have written many, but I believe I have one book in my library, and I don't believe I got past chapter 3 or 4. I don't remember why. I just remember his name.
Yeah. His book. So I went through a near-death experience, and I was like, okay, so I started studying other near-death experience. And if you really want to widen your aperture of what reality is, study near-death experiences, NDEs, because they're super fascinating. They're all flavored by the person's personality and their experience and their memory and that kind of stuff. So I'm not saying take any of them for fact, but if you study enough of them, which I have, I've studied literally thousands of them, there's so many similarities and so many overlap between almost all of them that you can't dismiss it. So Michael Newton was a master hypnotist and psychologist who was just using hypnosis in his.
That's why I couldn't get past chapter 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not being denigrating. I just
No.
It's another problem I have with Edgar Cayce, because Edgar Cayce was a phenomenon. When 1901, when he came out, and it was he knew what was wrong with people, and then he could go to sleep and he could develop a full healing itinerary. He could do a prognosis. It was amazing what he did. And then when they started he gave him some handlers, people in his crew. Then all of a sudden he went all ISIS unveiled. He went all Helena Blavatsky, and none of this is in the early Edgar Cayce material when he was just doing medical stuff.
Yeah.
But it seems like to me that, and I know this is off topic a little bit, but we do indulge tangents here. When it comes to Edgar Cayce, his earlier stuff was genius, but I think he got hijacked and didn't even know it, because it seems to me somebody took a bunch of Golden Dawn material, books and old pamphlets and all that, and when he went to sleep or they hypnotized him, they read this material to him. And then when they woke him up out of the hypnosis, they didn't tell him what they had exposed to him. They let other people in the future ask him questions, and he defaulted to what he knew, which was what he learned during hypnosis. Because even the mistakes in Helena Blavatsky's material and the mistakes in the Golden Dawn, especially chronological ones, Edgar Cayce went with them like nothing. That's why I believe his little deal. It's just the hypnosis to me is something I avoid, because I'm not saying it doesn't have value, but I kind of avoid it because I see what it did to the Cayce Foundation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was always the exact same way. But seeing it firsthand changed, a lot for me, because my wife actually does hypnosis, but so I have watched her put people under that I know, and she does past life regression, and I've watched her put people under that I know, and I can vouch and verify exactly what's happening, because I know these people, and I know that they're literally, like, in certain cases, sharing exact experiences from past lives, connecting with higher self and that kind of stuff. And anyways, I won't get into it because I don't want to go woo woo, but there is, of course, there's charlatans out there, and of course there's people that make stuff up. That's in everything. So you always have to use discernment for sure. But read Michael Newton's book, in Journey of the Soul, something like that. I forget the name of it, but it's freaking amazing. Because when you just have a body of work like he did, you're talking decades and thousands of people. You have so many data sets to pull from. It's not just one person or two people or 20 people. You're talking thousands of people. And it's really wild. He's been able to map out the whole reincarnation process, like what happens in between lives and the different levels and stages and places you can go and all that kind of stuff. So it's really fascinating. But that's
so the NDE. So Ian Stevenson,
yes.
Or Michael Newton. You're saying Michael Newton is the one that wrote about the NDEs?
Yeah, well, he takes people to what he focuses on is the life in between lives. So the space you go to once you die and before you go into your next sojourn.
Okay. So he's also the one you were referring to that was writing about the children recanting previous lives.
No, so I was getting that. Sorry, that's Ian Stevenson. So Ian Stevenson was a child psychologist who started having kids come in who were basically like telling their parents such detailed information about past lives that the parents didn't know what to do with it. So they'd bring him to him. And at first he didn't know what to make of it. And then it started happening more and more. And there's kids that would be like telling their parents, like say 4 years old, and telling their parents, oh, that looks like the boat that I died on. And be like, what do you mean? Like, oh, whenever I was in World War II, we were blown up, da, da, da. And so in this one particular case, the parents like, tell me more. And the kid said the name of the person that he was, the ship that he was stationed on, and the day that he died. And they went and researched all this and found out, yes, that was a real person. This all happened. And he has just hundreds and hundreds of these cases. More interesting than that is that there's something called a death mark. They found that with a lot of these kids, they would tell, so say there's a kid and the kid would say, oh yeah, in this life, I was this person, I lived in this village and I was murdered by this guy. You know, he hit me in the shoulder with an axe, right? And that kid would have a birthmark exactly there. There's kids that would talk about where they got shot in a previous life, where they had a birthmark on one side and on the exit wound side on the back. So they started calling these death marks. And this fades away at about 5 years old. It seems like something happens consciously, probably when they go to school. That's when everything goes downhill. But up until about 5, 6 years old, these kids are able to recount their previous lives in great detail. And give specifics. I mean, names, dates, locations, this kind of stuff where you can actually verify it. So Ian Stevenson became famous for researching all of this, and it's really fascinating.
Well, I'm on board because I'm convinced we're living life sims, and I will be releasing a video soon too on the research that's been conducted. I wasn't even going to cite Ian Stevenson. I was going to cite Russian reports, but you know what? I'm going to go ahead and make a mental note of this to go revisit Ian Stevenson and see the material, because I'm doing a video on the soul trap theory, and I'm a critic of it as it's presented on YouTube. So I do believe that we're living life sims, though, but I don't believe that I don't believe in the soul trap theory as to where you've lived your whole life, and then all of a sudden, once you're divorced of your avatar, you're given a choice to either go to the light or not, as if the way you lived your life meant absolutely nothing, and everything is now boiling down to a choice of white or black. It's stupid to me. So
yeah.
It's I just don't agree with it. But I'm going to look into Ian Stevenson, because that might help that video out better.
Well, I'll shine some light on that real quick about the soul trap. So this is what I've been able to learn from people like Tom Campbell, who's this guy staring at us right now, and Robert Monroe, who have spent decades personally exploring this, and then everything through Michael Newton. And, there's a bunch of other people too. So basically what Robert Monroe found out is that the reason we get stuck here, and the reason why they call it a reincarnation loop or a soul trap, is let's just, for lack of better words, say your soul, when it comes into Earth, it usually comes in just for a joyride, for a one-time thing. You come in, you have some fun. Well, then it's fun. So you want to come back in again and again. And the more you do it, you develop basically karma, for lack of better words. So by karma, what he would describe it as, imagine like your soul being like a particle. The more it comes in, it starts getting weighed down. It starts picking up mass. It starts becoming heavier, and you kind of get lower down in this, like your cycle around. Instead of being out on the outer rings of Earth where you can easily leave, you get pulled in. Okay, so big part of that and this is where you can get into the conspiratorial soul trap thing, because a big part of this are what are called belief systems. The belief systems that you have here on Earth, whether it's religious or spiritual or whatever, follow you to the spirit side. Like that spirit side is just another level of the simulator. It's not like you're in the physical simulator and then once you leave, you're in the greater universe. There's levels to the simulator, and the spirit side is it's like the loading area for this simulator that we're in here. So when you're over there, you get stuck in these belief system territories, and your soul is basically partitioned. Every time you come in, you partition a piece off, you go in, and you have like kind of a file on their side in the database, right? Of all of your lives, all of your experiences, everything that's ever happened is there. But each time you come in, you partition a piece off and you come in, and whenever you leave, you're supposed to go back to that file, right? And you're supposed to have this, like your oversoul or your higher self. That's what it is. Well, what happens is these pieces, say you're in a belief system here, say you're ridiculously religious, unwavering belief in this system, this God, this everything. Well, when you die and you go up there, the system creates this like area that you go into that's virtual, that's going to be based on your beliefs. So say you're super Christian, you might go to a place where you see Jesus up on a mountain, and you are in this neighborhood and everyone's nice, and there's a church in the middle of the neighborhood, and everyone goes to church on Sunday, and you're like, yes, this is heaven. Well, that's a virtual place. That's supposed to soften the blow of the death process, and you're supposed to move on from there. What's happened is we've built these virtual realities on the spirit side that are so convincing, and they're so entrapping. so engrossing that people don't ever meander out of that. You're supposed to, but they don't. We've created these belief system territories in the spirit side. Robert Monroe has visited many of them in person, written about it extensively. People get stuck there. So your oversoul will send in people saying, okay, we need to, before we can leave here, it's called escape velocity. Before we can build the escape velocity and actually leave this whole simulator, all the levels of it, you have to have all your pieces of your soul. Well, if so many of them are stuck in belief systems, you got to go and retrieve them. He actually created a program called Lifeline, where you go and retrieve your pieces of your soul. But they are so convinced that the place they're in is heaven or whatever, that they don't want to go. And they look at you as a demon or whatever. And even in the other side, they'll tell you, and you're just another version of them, another partition piece of your oversoul. You know, they'll be like, get away from me, you demon, whatever. So what we've done is we've created this mess where our soul, instead of being complete on the other side and has the ability to leave and come anytime it wants, it's so fractured and so fragmented in all these belief systems that it's not complete. And the only way you can leave is if it's complete. You can't leave any part of you behind. So that's the mess we've got ourselves in. So then you can make the argument, well, were these religions and things like this purposely created by something to do this? Or did we just put ourselves in this mess ourselves? Because that's how powerful our mind is. We can co-create our reality here and our reality on the spirit side. And we've kind of co-created a bit of a disaster, it seems. So that's, if that helps at all.
Well, I'm curious as to, has anyone ever done a validation, same word you're using here, of Robert Monroe? Has anybody ever done the exact same thing he has, replicated what he claims to be able to do, and comes back with the same conclusions from observations they made traveling the field?
Yeah, a whole bunch. So Tom Campbell here is a physicist, worked for NASA, worked for the Department of Defense, but he started he was Robert Monroe's kind of science consultant setting up all the stuff. Look into Tom Campbell. Tom Campbell went from a classical physicist to now he's one of the world's most renowned, I guess you would say, simulation theorist. I just went to a symposium with him in Huntsville, Alabama a couple weeks ago. And
you're talking about my big toe.
Yeah, my big toe, exactly. Right. So he's been able to recreate everything, and not just him. There's several other people that have. There's a guy. I'll have to send it to you. I can't think of the name right now. Here, But he wrote an amazing book about this, and he went through all the same training and came to the same conclusion. Anyways, to answer your question, yes, there's many people that have. I have been to the Monroe Institute. I trained there. And I have had not near the extensive experiences he has, but a lot. There's this thing called the Explorer tapes. So he put together this Explorer team. The Explorer team consisted of like 12 or 15 people that were highly trained. They have all of these audio tapes. If you go to the Monroe Institute YouTube channel, it's called the Explorer series. These are direct audio back from the 60s, 70s, 80s of them doing these reconnaissance missions in the Astral. It's all recorded. It's all very detailed. And you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of these, repeating the same thing, going to the same places, finding out that these are actually coordinates, that these aren't just these random, like, dimensions, that they're actually places that you can go to often and other people can go and you can meet people there. It's wild. So yes, there's been a lot of validation when it comes to that stuff.
So am I dealing with a person that, if I was to tell nobody in the world what book I put in my closet and laid on the floor, and it's the only book in my entire closet, and it's the only item on my floor, and I left a light on in there and a lamp, and I closed that closet, and then 3 or 4 weeks later, I contacted you or somebody else and said, hey, would you please tell Tom Campbell to read me the title of the book that I left in my closet? Is astral projection going to be of utility? Or is it something that can be done? I mean, I don't understand what its applications would be other than telling me a story if they can't actually provide me the proof. You understand?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's what remote viewing is. Remote viewing has been validated thousands of times. I mean, they've used it to. It's been covered, but that's how they actually found Saddam Hussein hiding in that little thing. They used it for all sorts of things. it's used by law enforcement right now. Like there's a ton of remote viewers that are actually on the payroll of law enforcement, detective agencies, FBI, all sorts of stuff. They track down all sorts of people using it. The one thing about it, and I mean, obviously I'm going to go into it a little bit more here. But I go into remote viewing here in just a second.
Well, what is the difference? I mean, are we not dealing with? I'm trying to educate me because I understand what remote viewing is. I get that it's not astral projection. I understand that, but what is the difference? If you're going to leave your avatar to do something, is remote viewing where the spirit stays with the body and you see something far in the field and your spirit's not actually traveling there to see it, or I'm just trying to understand because it's this is why I haven't had any astral projection transcontinental meditation guests on my channel a lot, because I mean these are distinguishing characteristics that I see that they're lightly defined, and remote viewing is seeing things from afar. Okay, well, would a remote viewer be able to tell me what the title of the book is in my closet? And is there any difference that I asked Tom Campbell or someone from the Monroe Institute? Hey, check it out. I left a book in my closet. The lamp is on. It's the only book in the closet. This is the exact coordinates to where you can find that book. I'm just interested to know because I forgot. I want to know what the title is of that book. What is the difference if they both produce the same result?
Yeah, no, great question. Okay, so the biggest difference between, say, a remote viewing and an out-of-body experience. So someone like a Robert Monroe, who could literally leave his body, he would be able to unfocus his consciousness out of his body and travel to your closet and look at that book and tell you. That takes a crazy amount of discipline. And in his case, he actually had to do a little bit of damage to his physical body to be able to unlock that part. There's a lot of other people that can do that. That is a lot harder to teach someone how to do. When it comes to remote viewing, what you're doing is, so you come to find out that everything is information. The entire universe, our physical reality, is all information. And our eyes are basically like, so picture your desktop on your computer. You have icons, right? So everything on your computer looks like an icon. Well, that's actually just zeros and ones. It's just data. But our eyes and the operating system of your computer turn them into shiny little icons. So everything looks nice. So when you're remote viewing, what you're doing is you're sensing the data. So what you do is, in a meditative state, you focus on something. You have to assign something. It's really interesting. So say you had that book in your closet. You couldn't say, remote view the book in my closet. What you'd have to do is you'd have to assign some sort of a symbol to it. So that's why we usually use coordinates, numbers, letters. That's a symbol because the mind works in symbolism, doesn't work in numbers and letters. So you would say, okay, we're going to assign the letter D, just for example, to it. So you would say, okay, and there's more to it. I'm very simplifying this, but you would remote view that D, but first the person who's creating the target would have to assign, they would have to use their intention. This is all just done through intention. Use their intention to link the symbol to the object. So you're actually remote viewing the coordinates or the symbol, or coordinates works really good. And you remote view that. So remote viewing is a terrible word because you don't actually view anything. Sometimes you see sights, sometimes you see pictures, but a lot of times you get a sense. You're using the information, you're reading the information field, but you're not using your eyeballs because you're not there. Your awareness goes there. So
I got you. So what you're describing to me is there would be no actual travel to my closet, and there would be no remote viewing of my closet. It seems to me that what you're describing would be readily more easily between two souls. If I was to ask that question, you would literally just read me. There's some type of technique that is allowing them to read this information straight from me rather than some other place where I placed this book.
Could be, but I mean, they've used things like random number generators. They've used all sorts of things to try to trick and try to figure out and poke holes in this. I mean, this has been going on for decades. There are people that are very, very trained, because it's all about how you can read the sense data. It's how your perception can read the sense data. So when remote viewers are remote viewing, they're in a meditative state, and say somebody gave you coordinates. I did this at the Monroe Institute. The coordinates was for Devil's Tower, and I have a picture of it. I'll show you. And I was supposed to just read these coordinates, and I don't read coordinates. I don't know what that means. It's just, numbers and letters. And went into a meditative state. And the way it works is you take out a piece of paper and you have a pen, and anything that comes to your mind, anything that comes into your perception, you're supposed to scribble down, write down, draw a little picture, doodle, whatever, right? You're not supposed to think about it. You're supposed to disengage your left brain and just simply go with the sense data. It might be a smell, it might be a sound. You might see something. In my case, I saw this mountain without a top, and I drew a mountain without a top. And then my left brain kicked in when I was done before they revealed the target. And I actually drew a little top on it and made it like a snow cap, because I was like, I got the impression, you just get this knowing. I was like, it's a mountain. I know it's a mountain, but why would a mountain not have a top? So I actually drew this little top on it and made it like snowy. I was like, it must have been a snow cap mountain. Then they showed the picture and it was Devil's Tower. And I was like, shit, I shouldn't have done that. But you just go with your intuition, and it's just going to be sense data. So for example, like the book in the closet thing, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you what's written on the book. Some very trained remote viewers might be able to. They get more granular in their detail. But I'm
going to go into agree that it's a possibility, because what you are describing to me is simply reading the field. And exactly. This is what I tell my community all the time. I don't have any experience with astral projection, transcontinental, remote viewing, none of that. But what I do have is a gift. And it's by virtue of imagination, I am able to put small pieces together and extrapolate as to what really happened in historical periods. And then I'm always shocked when I'm putting research together and I'm finding all these old books and obscure sources, and then I read, and now I have a bibliography that can now attach to what was formerly only a suspicion. I do this all the time. So information, I tell my community, is not stored in my brain. It's in the field. So I happen to be able to do with mathematical, calendrical, and historical research what you're describing to me other people do with remote viewing or this astral projection. It seems like it would be something similar, and yet the output is dissimilar.
Yeah, you're basically, it's a natural thing everyone can do that most people dismiss as background noise or just whatever. But anyone can do it. It's just remote viewing is basically just a word given to like the procedure, the method of doing it. They actually call it controlled remote viewing, CRV. That's just the method they put in place. But anyone can do it. It's just it's shifting your awareness. It's just you're taking your awareness that's focused on usually just the thing right in front of you, and closing your eyes and thinking. You're shifting your awareness to something. The coordinates, it could be anything. The coordinates for, like, say, Devil's Tower, they could have assigned that picture to the letter D and said, remote view this letter D. It's whatever they assign, wherever they link. It's you're just linking those two things. But so here's something. So you see on the screen, it says psychic archaeology. So there's this guy named Stephen Schwartz. Stephen Schwartz is one of the most prolific remote viewers. He has actually an army of remote viewers, and he's worked for many governments in the military and that kind of stuff. But back in the day, before he did all that, he was a psychic archaeologist. Like, he single-handedly is responsible for finding all sorts of archaeological sites, all sorts of buried mounds, buried civilizations, all sorts of stuff. So he would find them, him and his remote viewers, and then archaeologists would go and uncover them, that kind of stuff. They get the credit for it, right? No one really talks about him, but he's written many books on this. Very interesting guy. And he actually uses remote viewing to find, hidden archaeological sites, shipwrecks, treasures, all sorts of stuff. It's really, really interesting.
The more you talk, the more I'm being convinced that what I've been telling my community for a while, reading the field, seems to be no different than remote viewing.
Yeah. I mean, remote viewing is a really dumb word because you don't actually view anything, and it's not remote. I don't know where it came from, but yes, you're reading the field, knowing that everything's information, and our brains are basically just transducers or receivers. So it's like a radio. Like, there's radio waves permeating the air at all times. We don't see them, but the radio has a specific tuner, an instrument, an antenna that picks up those waves. It can tune them, and it can make sound out of it, right? That's what our brains do. Our brains are reading the information field at all times. And just like Ishak Bentov describes where thoughts come from. Thoughts are just, our brain takes data and amplifies it, turns it into a thought. So we have our own information field, luckily. That's why usually our thoughts are our own. But the same way our brain takes our own thoughts from our own information field and turns them into thoughts, your brain can also do that from information outside of your own personal information field. You can access other people's information fields, you can access the greater information field. That's called the Akashic record. Back in the day, I call it the database. You're just reading data. That's all it is. It's just data. And once you become more proficient at it, some people are naturally like that, some people train, all you're doing is just reading data. But you have to be able to discern what the data is, where it's coming from. For example, with remote viewing, it's very common for remote viewers to nail a target location and not nail the time. So, for example, there's been a lot of remote viewers that have been given tasks to remote view a certain place. They'll draw everything, they'll do their whole report and present it. And they're like, no, you were wrong. That's just not it. Da-da. Then decades go by and something's built there that's exactly like it. Or they find out that in the past, there was a structure there that was exactly like the remote viewing. It was just the wrong time. So
hey, listen, this needs to be addressed, because in date sequence predictive analytics, we come across these templates. It's like a whole series of events that are stamped into time, but they're free floating in the field. And when you start reading them and you start seeing in the analytics, you start seeing, damn, this right here is real. And sometimes we assign them to the wrong period. I'll give you an example. I did a series of videos on Trump showing that this man is about to do some very interesting things with America. My predictions videos are 4 years too early. They're 4 years too early. They're very highly detailed, specific about what Trump is about to do, about what's going to happen to a whole bunch of people when he does this, how it's going to change America, and how the United States is going to internalize. And there's a 50-year plan that was released by Condoleezza Rice, talked about it. Most people don't even know about this interview, but I quoted it on Archaix TV where she was talking about the United States already knows that the dollar is going to get attacked. We've been prepared for that for 50 years, and we already have a whole new dollar we're going to roll out, and it's going to shock the world. And listen, all these are my predictions videos about Trump, and I released those videos 4 years too early, not realizing that, damn, these are all going to come true. But I released them in 2020 and in early 2021, and I regret it because I was reading the field too early. And this is what you're describing to me right now with these remote viewings. It's almost as if certain events are already constructed in the field, but the field itself has not quite decided exactly when it's going to stamp those into our experience. So we can pick up on the events, but it's very hard to pick up on the exact timing until there's a catalyst which literally sucks that event into that time period, and then we begin to experience it. What you're saying is very real, and those who are doing predictive analytics and deep learning, we see this phenomenon a lot.
Yeah, and it could have something to do with the probability distribution field. So our past is way easier to view than the future. The future, the way I understand it, is, and this goes back to digital physics, which basically says that everything is discrete. It's not flowing. So if you look at things, it's going to be a packet, and we call them packets of probabilities. So your future, the best way I can describe it, check this out. It's like a hurricane. So you know how when a hurricane's coming, you have those little squiggly lines, like the little spaghetti noodles that tell you the probabilities and the paths. So the future is always going to consist of probable outcomes, and the system, the universe, the system will assign possibilities to each probability. Once that possibility gets to 90%, it becomes a probability, right? It's not a possibility anymore. So when you're reading the field, what you're going to be reading are probabilities. You're going to be reading usually the most probable future outcomes, and they're usually to about a 90% rate or so. So very probable, but there might be 2 or 3 probable paths, because sometimes they just deviate a little bit. So sometimes you can read something that doesn't actually come true, but it almost does, and it's kind of slightly off. That's because it was probably just slightly bifurcated from the other probability. So what happens is when we actually observe something, this goes back to digital physics and the observer effect. The Copenhagen interpretation of quantum physics basically states that whenever you observe something or take a measurement, that probability packet collapses into a point.
Yeah.
It has to become
the Heisenberg uncertainty principle is attached to that.
Exactly. Yeah. So the uncertainty principle basically states that you can't ever know the momentum or the place of any particle. You can only know one of the two, because things are until they're observed or measured, they're not actually real. It's all it is a wave. It's a probability. But once it's observed or measured by a conscious observer or a measurement device, it actually has to collapse that probability packet. Everything's discrete. Everything's like pixels. Our world is pixelated. So it's not like this free flowing thing. It's actually everything is encapsulated. The observer effect collapses that into a thing, but it collapses it based on the internal probability distribution field. So meaning that each packet of probability is going to have multiple probabilities within it, but each one's going to be assigned basically a probability score. Like this one's 90% chance, this one's 95, this one's 0, whatever. And whenever it collapses, whatever's the most probable thing, that's what happens. So when you remote view the future, especially, it's really hard to nail things because it hasn't happened yet. I mean, there is a certain bit of probability deviation that can happen when it's observed. And that maybe is why sometimes you have trouble predicting exact future events.
Yeah, what you're describing is, I don't remember where I read it. It might have been Ouspensky or Levi-Let. It could have been Bentov, but you're describing potentia. It's all in the field, but it doesn't collapse into experience until it's actually observed, and it's observed by multiple consciousnesses. So it's yes, these are probability modes. I talk about these a lot on my channel.
Yeah, I think they call it quanta. Is when
that's called quanta. The potentia and quanta are interchangeable.
Yeah. So it's fascinating, and it just goes back to showing that our world is a virtual reality of sorts. It's information based, and we're just the rendering agents. We're like the VR headsets that take that information and turn it into something. And free will is very important, because without free will, the reason why we can't predict the future with 100% certainty is because we have free will, and it is like a choose your own adventure game, and the future hasn't happened yet. There is probable outcomes, and they can get pretty damn close, but they can't get 100%. And that's good, because if we could get 100% on all future predictions, that would mean we have no free will. And what would be the point? Free will is important.
I agree. Yeah. I've often told people that there's like a threshold. You'll get as good as 87 to about 93% for a while, but reality has this default setting back that will just disrupt all your calculations. It's like the heartbeat of the construct. It's just, believe me, I've gone through it. I have spent thousands of hours doing date sequence predictive analytics. I'm telling you now, the construct has defense mechanisms from observers.
Yeah. And I mean, so you'll get this question a lot. People will be like, okay, if remote viewing is true, then why don't people win the lottery and, make millions of dollars and bet on the horses and that kind of stuff? This guy was telling me one time, he's like, got really good at remote viewing, and he was playing the lottery, and he was playing the small lottery things, and he kept winning. Right. And then he was like, screw it. I'm going to go big. I'm gonna do the Powerball thing. Right. And I remember him saying he got every single number all the way across the board exactly right, minus one number. Right. So imagine the numbers were like 12, 13, 14, whatever. And his was like 11, 12, right? Every number of his was exactly one off all the way across the board. And he took that as like a very clear indication from the system. Don't do this. Like it was almost like it was messing with them, like we're going to get you so close, but we're going to knock it down one number so you don't win anything, not even a single dollar, just to show you're not doing what don't do that. You know what I mean?
Well, it showed two things. It showed that, one, he was absolutely correct that something was possible, and yet it also showed that the construct has a way of defending itself from any possibilities that you try to force.
Yep, 100%. Yep, because I mean, at the end of the day, this is a training simulator that we do voluntarily come in. So if I think about it a lot with me personally, I'm like, am I doing things wrong by assessing the simulator, by trying to actually prove that we're in a simulator? Is that against like the rules? Because obviously you would think the system wouldn't want, like if you made a video game, you wouldn't want the characters in the video game trying to get out of the video game, right? That'd be crazy. It'd be a great movie, but it'd be a terrible video game.
They wouldn't be in your video game anymore. They'd be in a different one.
Yeah. So, but also I think, okay, well, if this is an evolutionary consciousness trainer, and the point is to level up the consciousness, at a certain point, the consciousness will become curious and awake and realize that's in a game. I mean, that's what they literally called in Hinduism, enlightenment, is whenever you realize you're in Maya, which is the dream, the illusion. So I think that it's on one level, the simulator does everything it can to make sure people don't know they're in a simulator, right? So they get the most effect. But at a certain point of development, it's inevitable. You're going to figure it out.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Which leads us to the next, which leads us to the conclusion in Archaix that we're in that right now. We are as a community of souls waking up fast that we're in a construct. No matter how we paint that construct, to many people, it's not always a simulation to everybody, but it's to me, the reason the world has become so weird is because the AI processing power is in trouble and it's throwing out it's in entropy. It's in rapid entropy. And I think that the only thing that corrects the situation that it has been in for hundreds, maybe hundreds of thousands of cycles is total systemic reset. Because in a total systemic reset, the souls that are on the inside are now in avatars that are forced into positions of fight or flight and just finding food and shelter. And it takes a long time to get up to build back up to that technological sophistication that they have the downtime to start processing their reality, studying it, and then come to the ultimate conclusion that they're in a construct, which induces the next systemic reset.
Yeah. Oh, I 100% agree. Your Phoenix theory is brilliant, and same with the Nemesis, that the best way the system can preserve its anonymity is to constantly be resetting everything. I mean, it makes sense. As much as no one wants to hear that, it actually would make perfect sense in an intelligently designed system. That's the only way that the entire collective won't realize that they're in some sort of a simulator. It's okay if a few people do, but they don't want everybody, which is why this video probably won't go viral. But I do think that there's probably these cyclical resets that happen because it does a couple things. It keeps the participants in the game, which is important, but it also challenges them. I mean, if you think about it, this isn't supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be tough. It's supposed to be hard. And once we get to a certain point of like technological advancement, things get easier. And it's not supposed to be that way. Like, Friedrich Nietzsche talks about, with like the Übermensch versus last men. I don't know if you're familiar with Nietzsche, but like the Übermensch is when you're like an activated human, you're fully activated. You're on top of your game. The last men are the people that are sitting there getting fed the government checks and just taking everything with a spoon and they're not trying anymore. You lost that human spirit. And one of the things that reinvigorates that human spirit is adversity, is a reset. A reset gets everybody working together. It gets everybody getting creative. You're like, it's survival mode. You have to get resourceful. You have to work. You can't get lazy. You cannot be lazy during a cataclysm. And so unfortunately, I think it's actually an integral part of the simulator.
Well, look, Jordan, I will quote Friedrich Nietzsche. In Beyond Good and Evil, he said, when a matter becomes clear, it ceases to concern us. So this is relative to what you're saying right now.
Yeah.
If all souls got to enter in a technological age, then they're not even concerned at all with how those souls achieved that or got there, because they're literally living on the backs of their predecessors. So you're right, the reset cycle is necessary so those same souls can enjoy a primitive lifestyle. So the hunter-gatherer, the post-reset steampunk civilization, the Heliolithic maritime empire, the sailor, the galley slave, the Etruscan who was captured on a Roman galley and chained to a slave ship. All these life sims that we've lived through, you're right. It's the reset is necessary to scramble the field and to allow all souls to have the same experiences over the time. I see it.
Yeah, and also think about it this way: like, so say you're a successful tech entrepreneur in 2024, and you're making AI and all this stuff, and you're making money hand over fist, and then there's a reset. You die. You come back in the next reincarnation cycle. It's like, okay, from the larger consciousness system, how it would look at it is, okay, let's see how those skill sets serve you now. Let's see how you can use that knowledge and that experience in this new, in this new environment. You know what I mean? It's a test. It's a challenge. Like, we think that that's cruel from this side because we're in the game, but from the other side, the enlightenment you get from researching like near-death experiences and that kind of stuff is that the understanding you have on the other side when you're removed from the emotions and the pain of the physical body is you see everything for what it is, that it's an experience, and that you actually appreciate even the terrible experiences. Like, for example, me, when I was, and you've talked about this being in jail and stuff, when I was on my deathbed, when I was in so much pain, I had pancreatitis for 2 years. My pain level was at a 10 day in, day out. And I was in so much pain and agony for years, and I reached rock bottom. My life was over. I would not change that for the world. Like if I could, I wouldn't go back and change it, because that created so much character within me. It created so much grittiness and toughness. Like I got a lifetime's worth of valuable experience points and toughness from that 2-year period that I wouldn't change it for the world. So when we look back at like these lives, like say there was a cataclysm and a bunch of people got wiped out, we look at it like, oh, this God is this evil God. But from the other side, from the consciousness development side, you look at it and you're like, ooh, like here's an opportunity to go in there and learn and to grow. And you know what I mean? Because this experience that we're in here is finite, it's limited, it's fleeting, it goes fast. But on the outside, you're eternal. And you look at these experiences as, if you just came in here and sat on your ass all the time and didn't do anything, you'd be like, what was the point? Why did I even do that? You know, I can do that in the spirit world, right? You come in here to work, to challenge yourself, to put yourself in these crazy situations. You know, that's the good stuff.
I agree.
Yeah.
Agree.
So
what you got here? Plasma universe. What are you talking about?
Plasma universe. So I've heard you mention Robert Temple talking about his older books. He just wrote a new book called The New Science of Heaven, and it's really, really good. And it answered some questions I had. So basically his conclusion, and I love Robert Temple, his conclusion is that 99% plus of the universe is plasma. It's non-physical. That physical realities like Earth are very, 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 very rare. Meaning like we're this like little physical fish bowl floating around in this vast non-physical plasma universe. And it's very, very interesting because I don't know what's next. Okay. When I was at the Monroe Institute, we're up on top of a mountain in Virginia. Okay. And we had all these crazy experiences, right? We're in a crazy theta brainwave state for 7 days straight, but we had when you're astral projecting, we go in these sensory deprivation booths and we do the thing. We had so many experiences with what would be called aliens, extraterrestrials, interdimensionals, whatever. And then I come to find out afterwards, this is the way it works. When you're up there, so say we're in this physical fishbowl floating around the universe, but the universe is trillions of years old. There's intelligences everywhere. All over the universe there's intelligences, okay? They're just not physical, because what we are is we're this brand new evolutionary node we're this new school. We're this new addition to the universe. So before there was just these non-physical intelligences that have been living for a long time, and they have their experiences the same way we do here, just non-physically out in the universe and other, dimensions. But this world that we're in seems to be this new addition, this new evolution. And so imagine the surprise of these other beings when they come across this place and they start looking in. They're like, what is that place? Look, it's totally different to them. Same way we look at them and we're like, what are these DMT type beings? They look at us as this new thing. So what I found out when we're at the Institute, when we're astral projecting, we're transcending our levels of consciousness to go up. It's hard for these non-physical beings to come down into our physical realm. It's like we couldn't go in the ocean without a submarine, right? They have to have a physical avatar body to come in here. We're the submarine to come into this physical world. But what they can do is wait for us to kind of ascend up to their level. It's easier to observe us. So that mountain is actually an observation point for non-physical intelligences, because we're going up to their level instead of them having to come down to ours. And that makes sense in the plasma universe, because what the plasma universe states is that we are this rarity. We're this very odd little marble, this physical marble floating around in this non-physical universe. But the non-physical universe is full of intelligence. It's just not full of life the way we know it. It's not physical. And I think that we're starting to attract attention, from, these non-physical entities, for sure, because we're interesting. It's very interesting. And, I don't want to go too far down rabbit holes of aliens and that kind of stuff, but that's what we call aliens because we don't know what we're talking about. They're just non-physical entities. And Robert Temple describes them that plasma itself is intelligent. Plasma itself is conscious. and plasma can be folded and formed. I mean, plasma, the word actually means to form, I believe. And it can actually form into things, but they're plasma. So plasma is intelligent. And basically, our world is the same as the dream world. It's the same as these other dimensions, except our world has rule sets that govern the way it looks and behaves and this kind of stuff. And it's full of conscious observers. So it's always being rendered in this physical form because all the waveforms are collapsing into particles because, you know, there's tons of conscious agents here, or there's tons of VR headsets. So our world's physical. The universe is non-physical plasma, but it's full of intelligent life because plasma by nature is intelligent and conscious. So that's that in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's a far departure from his first book, hold on, The Serious Mystery.
Yeah, that's a great book. Yeah, this is a far departure, and it is backed with tons of data. I mean, the way he does, it's a very, very interesting read.
It's interesting. Yeah, so, I was a critic of his first book because the issue of the Dogon, and several researchers came behind him on that book.
Yeah.
And, they went to Africa and they went among the Dogon. They tried to find out the source material for all this. And there's some really good books about that follow-up research. I was a critic of Robert Temple on his first book, but he did come out with another book that was very impressive. But I have never heard of this new book he came out with talking about the plasma universe. I'll check that out.
Yeah, it's called The New Science of Heaven. It's really, really fascinating. Loads of data sets. So I think you'll find this super interesting. Do you know who Eric Rankin is?
No, I do not.
Okay. So through a weird synchronicity, like it's been happening in my life a lot lately, I end up at this place on the left, which is called the Integratron. You ever heard of it?
No.
Okay. So George Van Tassel.
That is a name I know. That is a name I know.
Okay. George Van Tassel was, the story goes, this is way up in Landers, California, above Joshua Tree. I find myself out there with Sarah. We don't really, just like everything, it's just, why are we here? How did we get here? But there's got to be a reason to it, right? So anyways, George Van Tassel was evidently approached by some Venetians, Nordic type aliens, a long time ago, told how to build this building. The building has no metal parts. It's completely interlocking wood. It's beautiful. It's basically like being inside of a cello. They told him that they needed him to build it so that it's a cellular rejuvenation building for humans, but also it powers their ships. Anyways, whatever you want to think about that, that's the story behind it. It's an anomalous, it's when you go there, your phones don't work, GPS doesn't work. It's a bizarre place. There's a place called Big Rock right next to it. Anyway, so we're there. Eric Rankin is this brilliant dude. And we find ourselves in this private presentation at the bottom of this Integratron, which is this mysterious building, being given this presentation about sonic geometry. And sonic geometry it came to him in a very mysterious, crazy way, but it's so interesting. It's the idea that sacred geometry can be converted into sound waves. And that basically when you take sacred geometry, you can turn it into notes and tones. When you play those notes and tones, it does all sorts of different things depending on what you're doing, what you're playing. So throughout his exploration of sonic geometry and all the things he was doing, he unlocked all of these things and he got this knowledge. And this is where the escape room theory actually came from, is he was told that all of these clues are embedded all throughout the world on purpose by the system. We're supposed to find them, and clues are supposed to be clumped together to make bigger clues, basically. And that a big part of it is the sacred geometry that we keep finding, and these things that are in these ancient monoliths and ancient temples and artwork and that kind of stuff are supposed to be transcribed into sound. And when you play certain sounds in certain orders and arrangements, it does things like spiritually, it does things consciously, it does things physically. And that's the secret. That's what we're supposed to be doing.
So basically what you're telling me is that some of these very highly complex, beautiful agroglyphs that we call crop circles are actually some type of music.
Boom. Yes. Earth is an escape room style IQ test, and that the agroglyphs and the crop circles are a big, big part of it. And that same information is embedded in like columns of ancient Hindu temples. It's embedded into the Great Pyramids, all sorts of things. They're different symbols. They're just different puzzles that we're supposed to solve. And that sound is a humongous part of it. A lot of them can be transcribed into sound.
Oh, you already had some agroglyphs on file.
Yes, sir.
Well, I'll be damned.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I devote a couple chapters in my book Anunnaki Homeworld to crop circles, and I show the calendrical connections because a lot of them can be deciphered using the calendars.
Yeah. Yep. So so it just goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that this is it's a game with built-in levels of advancement. So you can basically choose if you want to play on the hard mode or the easy mode. So then, this right after that, I'll just tell you real quick, and then I'm almost done with this, that I started off this whole journey with using Hemi-Sync to lower my blood pressure and to basically heal my body. I learned how to do like all sorts of internal remote viewing, healing, and all these crazy things that they teach you. But I was just using things I found on Reddit and stuff because this was 2020, everything was shut down. So I've always wanted to go to the Monroe Institute, always. And this is how these synchronicities have been working in my life. I get a message from them. This is like right after we went to the Integratron. And I get a message saying, hey, we want you to come to the Monroe Institute. We'll pay for it. We're doing a special thing called Creators Gateway. We're just looking for different people with big audiences. I have a big TikTok audience, and they invited me to come. Completely free. I did the whole thing. It was amazing. They rolled out, all the bells and whistles. That's Joe McMonigal in the top right there. We did a private. I got trained by him. He's Agent 001. He was the top remote viewer, and basically that there ever has been. And it was such an amazing experience, but it happened in this way where I didn't even ask to go. I didn't even know this was a possibility. Next thing you know, I'm there, and it was nuts. It was just absolutely freaking nuts. So I got to go there and got to train and got a bunch of in-depth and even kind of secret stuff that they don't, really do for the public. And it was wild. So that really confirmed all the things I was able to explore when I was there. I was able to really, really astrally explore. I mean, I went to the craziest places, and I don't even want to say it because it just makes me sound like a loony, but like if I could just tell you the stuff that we saw and did there, it's nuts. But what it does is it gives me what Robert Monroe talks about is instead of it being a belief, it's a known. These were things that I thought before, but now I know that the way we are in this physical fishbowl floating around in this non-physical plasma universe full of ancient non-physical intelligences led me to answering finally my three big questions, and not answering because the journey is never over, but the answers I've come to so far. Who are we? We're a non-physical consciousness experiencing Earth life via a physical avatar. Where are we? We're inside a virtual reality-like consciousness simulator called Earth, where we come to learn, grow, and evolve. Why are we? Creator created all this as a self-learning system. As we get to know ourselves, Creator gets to know itself. For thousands of years, all the mystics, all the most spiritual, enlightened, spiritual masters have been talking about get to know yourself, know thyself, know thyself. So that led me to creating what I call simulator theory, which basically states that instead of simulation theory, which kind of posits that we're like NPCs in some sort of a computer simulator, simulator theory, as opposed to simulation theory, looks at it from like a perspective of learning. So think about like, say, a flight simulator. A pilot goes into a flight simulator to do things in that flight simulator that he couldn't do in a regular plane, right? You can simulate landing with one engine with a 50-mile-an-hour crosswind. You can simulate all these things, hoping that you never have to use them, but knowing that you can do it in the simulator and you don't have to worry about hurting your physical real self, okay? So we come into this world to do what we talked about earlier, to put ourselves in, precarious situations, to put ourselves in adversity and challenges, and to learn and grow and evolve on the other side, using this as a simulator as opposed to a simulation. So it's a virtual reality-esque world, but with a purpose. It's all for soul development. And that is, and it goes deeper than that. I mean, I can get into how Source partitioned itself off into the non-physical entities and how, this physical world was eventually evolved. But at the core of it is that. And hopefully that offers a little bit of hope for people that were like me in my dark night of the soul, where I thought everything was evil and everything was terrible and there's no hope. And I've learned through all this hardcore exploration, I mean, just going into these things fearless and saying, I don't know where we're headed. Like, I want answers. I want truth. And just, and I'm just getting started. But now I have the more I've learned, I'm more hopeful than at the beginning. So to give some people some inspiration there, learn more. Ignorance is not bliss. Knowledge is power. And the more you learn, the more powerful you are. And the more you learn, the more you do realize that there are some twisted things, and there are some people hijacking the system and doing some terrible things, of course. But overall, overwhelmingly, the universe is unconditional love, and the universe is positive. But you have to have some good and bad. You can't have a rainbow without the
Well,
rain.
you say, now I get it, Jordan, there's a distinction to be made. You say there are some people doing some nefarious and evil things, but we really don't have a lot of evidence that a lot of the things that we see in the media are even real. This is just the world that's being presented to us. A lot of what's going on around us is just totally AI background programming to make this a more believable experience.
100%.
So
100%. Yeah.
I agree. I agree with the whole presentation. How you I don't have any problems. I don't get hung up on the distinctions between simulation and simulator, but you make a very valid point. I'm still. I mean, I could default back to my Central East Texas simulacrum, or I can say it properly and tell you it's the simulacrum.
Yeah.
It's the simulacrum actually entails the whole. I mean, it's a copy of something. It's a copy of a real reality. I'm not convinced this is entirely fake. And what I mean is that the sky is very convincing that there could be a cosmos somewhere else. It's just not here. That's a hologram that we're looking up into the sky. So
Yeah.
I don't know. There could be a universe full of stars, quasars, pulsars, black holes. There could be this massive super construct, and it could too be a simulator. Every bit of it. It's I mean, when I think about these first principles, I default back to what is God? God is eternal. What does an eternal God mean? It means that he created everything, or she created everything. What does that mean? That means the creation is eternal too. Because any one aspect that you attribute to the Godhead must be attributed forever if it's truly eternal. So if an eternal deity has never stopped creating, then it's always going to be creating new souls to enjoy new things, which is going to require new constructs, which is going to require the maturity of souls to exit old constructs to go enter the new ones. It's an undying process. It's forever.
Yep, absolutely. Creation's never over. It's actually creating new creators. So you had mentioned at the beginning, most people are going to think, completely dismiss everything unless you have something that maybe bridges the gap. I created something that I used for myself. I've used it for other people. It's extremely effective. And I put it into a course form. It's called Soul Sync. And I'll just tell you real quick what it is. And this is the culmination of everything I've learned. So like we've discussed, your consciousness is a non-physical, stream of energy that needs to come into this physical world. In the same way that we have to go into a submarine to go into the depths of the ocean, it needs a physical avatar. Physical avatars is the human body. So your soul has to enter into a physical avatar. Well, the physical avatar, depending on when and where you're born and a few other factors, is a semi-autonomous, sentient, basically biological machine. It's very advanced. Even without your soul in it, it could maintain life. It could find shelter and food and that kind of stuff. So also, when you blend in a little human design, astrology, Kabbalah, that kind of stuff, you can find out that this is so fascinating. Look around the world. There's 8 billion people. You would think it would be complete anarchy. But there is somebody doing everything that needs to be done. There's someone picking up your trash. When you go to the hospital, there's a doctor waiting to greet you. When you go to the airport, your plane's ready to take off. There's people doing every menial task, period. And they're usually doing it pretty well, almost as if they're designed for that task. So you start to think, okay, when you look into astrology, you look into human design, you find out that every second of every day, just like a turning wheel, people are born. And depending on when you are born, where you're born, you're going to be given some preset characteristics, traits, maybe certain foods you should eat, maybe certain climates you should live in, some skill sets, like meaning here's what you should do to make, a living. This is all preset the day you're born. And it's this beautiful wheel that spins around constantly, making sure that there's not too many archetypes. There's not too many personality types in one range. It's evenly distributed, making sure that every type of person is created beautifully. That's how this whole world works. It's a beautifully designed system. So knowing that your physical body is sentient, knowing your physical body has wants, needs, and desires of its own, and knowing that your consciousness inserts into it with its own soul to-do list. You come here with certain objectives and missions that you're trying to accomplish while you're here. It makes you realize that you are two different things. You're a fusion of two things. And while you're in this temporary vessel, while you're in this rent-a-car to travel around on Earth, you need to become harmonious with it. If not, it's like having roommates sharing a house and they're not getting along. So to bring balance into the house, you hear people all the time say they're not comfortable in their own body. To bring balance into the house, I developed something called Soul Sync, which is this self-development, for lack of better words, program that audits and establishes what your physical body is and what it needs, and what your soul is and what it needs, and fuses them together so that you can bring harmony and you can bring peace into the house. And when you do that, a lot of things happen. Anxiety goes down, depression goes down, and you find your true purpose in life. And usually you have two purposes. You usually have a physical and a non-physical purpose. So the culmination of the last 5 years of my research has led me to this. I made it for myself. It works so good. I'm also unleashing it for other people. So anyways, that's the end of this. And then I'll minimize this screen so I can see your mug again. I haven't seen your mug in like an hour and a half, Jace. 2 hours.
Man, you should have had another device on so you could have been watching it like I do. I got 3 screens.
Okay, yeah. I'm not there yet, man. So let me stop sharing. There you are.
All done.
So that was me introducing a variable into your thinking for the day.
Yeah, man, it's good stuff. It's everything's a little different. Yeah, somebody had mentioned Darius J. Wright. I need to have him on my channel. It's never going to happen, guys. I'm just going to tell you straight out. That, listen, it's never going to happen. Other NDE people, you know, they got something genuine to say. I don't have a really problem with that. I may have people who share their NDE experiences in there, but with Darius J. Wright, you have to understand. I know a whole lot about that guy, and I know all about the Lulu scam, and I know that he's a computer programmer, and I know that he had a whole bunch of people thinking that a computer program was giving them all kinds of esoteric information, and that a supernatural being was communicating through a whole collective of people through a MacBook, and Darius J. Wright was a part of that scam. And there's a whole bunch of people in the chat who can verify because they were there when it happened. And when that grift was no longer good, Darius J. Wright entered the community as all of a sudden as an NDE expert. So yeah, guys, I got a lot of background information on a lot of people in the truther community. I just don't, it's not my business to put shit out there. But with Darius J. Wright, he's a little too close to home. Yeah, his people really leaned on me trying to get on my channel before I just told him all about himself. Lisa Harrison, that whole clique right there, they're not welcome in Archaix. I'm just not trying to hear it.
Well, I appreciate you letting me through your filter.
Yeah, I don't have any red flags with you, man. It's not at all. But there are, believe me, the community is a lot smaller than it pretends to be. I promise you that.
Well, hey, man, you know, like I said before, like all this stuff, basically everything I said today, 6 years ago, I would have thought all this was nuts. Okay. It's through experience that I'm to the place I'm at now, not through like reading the books and being introduced to all this stuff is what kind of cracked open my perception. But the more you do these things, your perception grows. It like starts off like everyone looks at the world like this, like through this tiny little pinhole, right? That's everything that's possible. And then through knowledge, through learning, through experience, that starts to grow. And eventually it's the size of a basketball, and then it's the size of a car, and then, you know, and it keeps stretching. And then now my perception of what's possible and what reality is has stretched so wide. It's like when you work out, the more you work out, your muscles grow. This is like working out your perception of what's possible. And like Aldous Huxley talks about, you know, it's like your funnel that funnels in all the information. It grows and grows and widens and widens. So that's where I'm at now. And it's been a wild journey, and I never thought I'd be here talking about this kind of stuff, but I've been following you for years. You were a big part of it for me, which is to start questioning things. So that's all I ever tell people: question everything. And if something doesn't want to be questioned, question the shit out of it, because you know, like I hate that. I'm an open book, man. You'll find like crap that I've done in my past and everything. Like, that's just living life. But like, there's nothing shady about me. I have no secrets. I'm an open book, man. You know, start digging, and I don't care.
Well, I don't care. I don't care about people's past.
Yeah.
I do care about their behavior in the recent past if they're trying to put a message out to the community. Like, yeah, he's not the only one. I've done work with others in the community, only to find out later, said, "Damn, I was dancing with the devil and didn't even know it." But
I like how you have your standards, and like, just because someone is doing something similar, or just because they're making some waves, you don't automatically accept that. You're like, no, you got to prove it. Like, you know, and I love how you stand up to that. And I love how you tell people, hey, if you have a problem with me or anything I say, come on my show, let's chat it out. And that silence to me is what kills me. It's like, if you call someone out and then they run away, that almost seems like they're admitting fault, you know. And I know they'll say, oh no, I'm above this, but it's like, hey, like, if someone challenges me, I accept that challenge, you know, let's chat it out, man. Like, but it's that silence part makes you think there's something they're hiding. So I love how you're vocal and you're transparent, and you're always like, hey, I'm here, guys. Like, I'm not running, I'm not going anywhere.
you know what? This is all digital, Jordan. This is all on computer. It's all safe on a screen. I spent too many years of my life in real fights. I don't fear digital universe. It's nothing to be scared of. This is nothing. That's a good presentation. You came real, you know, guns blazing, man. It was good. It was good stuff. But you didn't provide me that link to a Soul Sync. I need to put that in the description box.
Okay, it's just on my my website. So I didn't want to be.
Do I have the website on the description box?
Maybe it's digijordan.com. So the course.
I do. I remember that now.
So the course is not out yet. I'm putting the finishing touches on it because I was just I can't say anything. I wish I could. There's something that just happened in the last few days that made me stop it, because I'm about to significantly upgrade a certain part of it with something that I'm very, very excited about. And I wish I could say more, but soon I will. So anyways, then go to my website and they can sign up for the my newsletter and you know, all that, and follow me online and stuff. I didn't want to be salesy, so I almost didn't even put that in there at the end, but I am very proud of it because it's something that works, and it's something I've been led to do in such like synchronistic ways, to where if I don't do it, it's almost like I'm basically failing this whole sojourn that I'm putting together. Like, the whole body of work, the whole reason I'm doing all the things I'm doing seems like it led to this. So I have to get over my own imposter syndrome of like I'm in marketing, dude. So I do marketing for businesses, and I'll market the shit out of a business. You know, people love me, but I don't market myself very good. And this is a brand new thing where I'm actually even talking about myself, where I'm actually even putting stuff out there. So I have to get over that part. I can do it for other people, no problem. That's what I do for a living. It's really hard to do it for yourself, but we're entering in this new age, man. It's the creator economy. People aren't going to buy products from corporations pretty soon. It's people like you, people like me. They want people they resonate with, and that's going to be the businesses of the future. You know, we're entering a new era of business, and so it's called the creator economy, and it's a very important thing. But to do it, you have to embrace it, and you have to do it obviously in a non-tacky way. But you know what I mean? Like, it's important. People want the information that you're putting out there.
Well, I will tell you this: I'm about to start selling coffee. Aaron's Choice coffee for those who want to wake up. Got about 24 different flavors. I wish I could
want to wake up. I love it.
For those who want to wake up, I got new Aaron's Choice coffee mugs. I'm about to release those. I got a pretty nice gig going. I was really looking for, I've never been sponsored. My entire channel grew up organically. I've never paid for advertising, never paid for subs. I had 300 videos before I even had 1,000 subs. I used to have 12 people in my chat for over a year. Same 12 people pop up in my chat, and I would do live videos. So now I wish I could like have sponsors that I believe in, like maybe a polygraph sponsor, for those, so we can see who's bullshitting as a lie detector. I don't know. I don't have a lot of products that I want to endorse. Coffee's one. I love coffee. I drink like Fiji water. I would take them on. I was thinking about maybe Vistaprint, because Vistaprint, I use Vistaprint for everything. All my thank you cards. Anytime somebody sends sends something like a book or books or orders something from Archaix and sends us like a donation, we have these special cards we send out that are made on Vistaprint. All my business cards are Vistaprint. I got posters, T-shirts, mugs, all made by Vistaprint. I might do them, but when you're talking about marketing, I might contact you. I might email you about some other stuff, man, because we're my Archaix team. We're putting together some stuff, and one thing we've never done is marketing and advertising. And I'm now at that point where my expenses pretty much require me to go ahead and find a sponsor or two and to do some professional marketing.
Hey man, I'm always here to help. I love what you're doing, and you need to be reaching more people. I think this age we're coming into, I mean, it's going to get real weird here pretty soon, especially with the election and everything. And I think that people like you need a bigger audience. And we have enough people. I mean, some of these people that have these huge audiences, you look at them, you're like, how, you know, like people like you need to be reaching.
Don't get me started. I'll go on a tiny hat rant. I know how. I already know how.
It's we're up, you know, the system is not in favor of the use of the world, but I think that might be changing. I think you're positioned very well here moving forward. So just keep doing what you're doing, man.
Yep. I appreciate it. Well, Jordan, I'm gonna go ahead and exit you backstage, man, and I'll talk to you later. Expect an email from me in the next few days. I got some we might be able to work together on some other stuff. And also be watch the X feed, because you made a comment a minute ago about you see my posts on Phoenix and on Nemesis X and how they're very different. They're totally different protocols. But the reason I'm doing them on X is to show everybody they're not. I'm now making discoveries showing that they're just two different functions of the same system, the weapon in the sky. It's pretty profound.
Huh.
So I'm gonna.
Does that change? You don't have to give anything away, but does that change the 2040 versus 2046?
No, absolutely not. It doesn't change the dates at all, but it changes what is happening and what happened in the historical record. I'm now seeing it much clearly. I had no idea there was so many other connections between the two until I started doing these X threads. Because doing them on an X format makes me abbreviate the content, abbreviate the subject matter and the source materials, put whatever charts or images are necessary, and that's one complete data point. And I'll put it aside. And when the whole thread's done, I'm stuck with 30 data points. It's a beautiful data set, but it has showed me so many things that correlate and have crossovers with other Archaix material that I've never seen before. So I'm really enjoying the way I'm doing the X threads, because it's teaching me at the same time as I release these posts.
That's awesome. I've always, for what it's worth, my understanding or perception of the Phoenix versus the Nemesis is I've always kind of seen the Phoenix as almost like a pinpoint reset that's probably at like a vibratory level, basically going at frequency, high versus low. Whereas the Nemesis seems to just be like a, you're all fucked kind of a deal.
Yeah, Nemesis is totally systemic. It's like whole hemisphere or whole world. Phoenix is discriminating. You're right, but the arithmetic and the calendars I'm finding is identical. I just been looking at it from the wrong perspective. So I think I'm dealing with the exact same like weapon in the sky. It just has different functions following different protocols, and those protocols are measured differently.
Huh. Well, hey man, I'll be waiting.
It's the same.
Nice. Cool, brother.
All right, Jordan. We'll holler at you later.
All right. Thanks, Aaron's. Thanks for paying attention.
That was a good presentation. That was good stuff, guys. Ralph Ellis tomorrow. I'm doing a video with Ralph Ellis. He wrote all about the King of Edessa. If you don't know what we're talking about, you will tomorrow. Let's see. Don't have a lot else to talk about. We do have the December 7th meetup. Still have some tickets available. They're probably going to be sold out long before December 7th. This is going to be OFIS demonstrations for only those who attend. I'll be using the date sequence predictive analytics system of OFIS. OFIS is software that was completely designed by me based off the fact that I have isolated so many of the mathematical protocols that govern our life that our scientists call physics constants, and yet they haven't really isolated all of them, nor do they understand how they're so interchangeable with other phenomena. And this is what I'm showing. I gave a sneak peek at Virginia Beach, but I'm gonna do the full Monty at the Houston meetup. But other than that, I'm over here today because I got construction on right there on the edge of my property. It's just too loud. I couldn't, even in my soundproof studio, I learned real quick it wasn't soundproof at all. So I hurried up and relocated and came over here. But as for that, I don't have any more announcements. It was a great guest. Get in the description box and go check out his. I do have his link to his website, and you can also join him and follow him on Twitter because I don't think he drops daily, but he drops enough for you to pay attention. And I'm gonna go ahead and hit this outro. And I love you, beautiful Archaix, for following me. And stay tuned because you got some amazing video drops, uploads, data dumps. Yeah. No one's going to blow that Göbekli Tepe crap, Younger Dryas BS up your ass anymore. I'm trying to make sure of that. So I'll holler at you guys later. I'm going to go and hit this outro. And if there's any announcements I forgot, I apologize. But my moderators can remind you in the comment section. Anyway, I love you people.
Sure about this Archaix thing, but AIX is certainly worth looking into.
I'm most impressed that Jason is not going to tell you something. He's going to show you.
Archaix shows us if you record enough facts, the answers just stare you in the face.
A man who knows the facts is unafraid to joust with contrary opinions. That's Jason.
I can't have that dude on my show. You know how many guys I've had on here who are running from that dude? Be a mess.
Jason says being wrong gets us closer to being right.
You got to break free or die trying, guys.
Archaix showed me how to see if there was a tater in them onions.
Listen, Archaix isn't one guy against the Matrix. That's dumb. No, it's a family of souls waking up.
If I've learned anything since finding Archaix, if something is true somewhere, it's probably true everywhere.
Jason said if it's true, we can see it from multiple different vantage points.
So I broke pattern and went up there and slapped that guy. Total pattern break.
If you get stumped, you got to break pattern.
Jason says you don't need to know how to read, you need to know how to think. I think that's where I went wrong.
Jason figured it out. People are smart and they can decide for themselves if something is true or not.
No, I don't have anything to hide. I just don't want Jason anywhere near my accounting files.
There's a bunch of us who don't listen to Archaix. We signed a different deal. I think it's AIX or something.